believe we have a quorum, and we can begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, everyone. This is the City Planning Commission review session. Today is Monday, April 11th, 2016, and a quorum is present. The first item on the agenda is the proposed zoning map amendment, urban development action area project designation, project approval, and disposition of city-owned property. In addition to zoning text amendment and special permits to facilitate approximately 1,000 residential units in the Melrose Hub Bronx community. Now, our presenter is Paul Phipps.
And before Paul starts, this is a momentous occasion, not only because of the project he's presenting, but I'd like to announce with a very bittersweet announcement that Paul is making his last presentation today at review session. He's been a planner in both our Queens and Bronx borough offices. He's worked on many notable projects, including this one, including the Special Forest Hills District, Lower Concourse rezoning, East Fordham Road rezoning, and Tres Fuentes. And we're very, very sad to see him leave. But we do want to congratulate him because he is now going to become the district manager of Community Board 4 in the Bronx. So we're not losing Paul, we're gaining a community board. Let's hope, Paul. Think of us kindly while you're out there. Of course. So we will see him from time to time, and our Bronx office will see him more than from time to time. But I do want to thank you on behalf of the department and the commission for your great service to the department and your continued service to the city of New York. We'll miss you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
So make this presentation.
So of course I want to make sure that the last presentation was a really good one. This is
He
an
held out
application-
until now. He
this is
refused to make any.
application for La Centrale. This is an application by the Department of Housing Preservation and Development to facilitate the La Centrale project in Bronx Community Board 1. It's important to note that the project area was part of the Bronx-Chester Urban Renewal Plan, which expired in March of 2015. The Bronx-Chester Urban Renewal Area was created as part of the South Bronx Neighborhood Development and was adopted in August of 1989. The objectives of the Urban Renewal Plan, among others, were to provide residential development in the area in a comprehensive manner, to provide convenient community facilities, recreational spaces, and retail. In 2013, HPD issued requests for proposals for the proposed development site. The goal of the RFP was to facilitate housing opportunities within the Bronx-Chester Urban Renewal Area, as well as maximizing affordability and continuing to enhance the area's community revitalization efforts. So to facilitate the project, the applicant proposes 5 actions, including the disposition of city-owned property, designation as an urban development action area plan, a zoning map amendment, amendments to Appendix F to include the area as part of the mandatory inclusionary housing areas, 2 special permits, one for distribution of required open space, and the other to permit location of buildings without regard to yards, courts, heights, and setbacks, and the last special permit to permit residential and non-residential uses to be arranged on the 2nd floor within Building B without regard to location. So the proposed project includes 5 buildings, which will be part of a large-scale development. It will include 832 units of affordable housing, 160 units of supportive housing, over 46,000 square feet of commercial floor area, over 124,000 square feet of community facility space, 209 underground parking spaces, 426 bike parking spaces, and over 90,000 square feet of open space. So the project site, the project area is roughly triangular and is comprised of 3 tax blocks, Block 2361 portions of, Block 2363, and Block 2294. It is generally bounded by Bergen Avenue to the west, Brook Avenue to the east, and a line 190 feet north of east of 149th Street to the south. And the Metro North, the MTA 2 and 5 line runs right along here. All tax lots So a little bit about the surrounding area. So this is the project site outlined here in yellow. All the tax lots north of Westchester Avenue are currently vacant. These sites right here are currently composed of about 50 at-grade parking spaces and a vacant commercial building. Notable projects in the area include south of the project site, which is Triangle Equities, which is also an EDC-sponsored project, about 88,000 square feet of commercial and community facility space. Also notable projects include Via Verde, which is 221 units of mixed income housing. You also have Melrose Court, which are condos just north of the project site. St. Anne's Terrace, which is also a relatively new 500-unit plus mixed income development. You also have the South Bronx High School athletic field, South Bronx High School. You've got St. Mary's houses. Again, this area is well served by transit with the 2 and 5 line running along Westchester Avenue. You also have 6 bus lines that operate in this area along the hub. Westchester Avenue is a major commercial hub with single-story and 1 and 3-story commercial buildings. Also, other notable projects and developments include the Opera House Hotel. You also have Roberto Clemente Plaza, which is undergoing redevelopment, and you have Sobro's offices, which are located right here. It's important to note within the surrounding area, some of the surrounding heights of the buildings. So both the Bronxchester houses as well as Via Verde goes up to about 20 stories at its highest point. Via Verde steps down a little bit, as well as St. Mary's houses and both north and south are also about 20 stories in height as well. These are just some areas of the photos of the surrounding area. These are views along Bergen Avenue as well as Westchester and Brook Avenue, and also looking east on Bergen Avenue as well. Additional views include views northeast on Bergen Avenue and also Bergen and East 152nd Street. Lastly, in terms of area photos, you've got views on Bergen and East 153rd Street, and also on Brook and Bergen. It's important to note here, this photograph right here is a picture of Via Verde, which I mentioned earlier. Again, at its highest point, it's about 20 stories in height, and it actually steps down, and this is a mixed income, both rental and housing development, recently developed within the project area. So again, just to review the actions which are outlined right here. There are 5 of them, including 3 special permits, an amendment to Appendix F, zoning map amendment, and disposition of city-owned property. So in terms of the zoning map change, currently the zoning in the area is zoned M11 and a portion C44. M11 allows light manufacturing. Typically, it's a buffer between heavier manufacturing and adjacent residential districts. It allows use groups 4 through 15, 16, and 17. Excuse me. M11 zoning district.
We have a nostalgic cheer.
They have a maximum permitted FAR for commercial community facility and manufacturing uses of 1.0. It's important to note that residential development is not permitted in M11 districts, and building heights and setbacks are controlled by the sky exposure plane, which begins at about 30 feet above the street line. C44 districts are general commercial districts. They're typically not located in central business districts. They have a maximum FAR of 3.4 for commercial and residential uses and 6.5 for community facility uses. The proposal is to propose all of the proposed tax lots in the project area to a C62 zoning district. This would have a maximum residential FAR of 6.02, 7.2 with quality housing, and we also have a maximum commercial FAR of 6.0. The rezoning will increase the maximum street wall height to 85 feet, and the overall building height will also be subject to the sky exposure plane. Along wide streets, the street walls rise to a minimum base height of 60 feet, and under height factor regulations, buildings may not penetrate the sky exposure plane above 85 feet above the street line. In addition to zoning map amendments, they are proposing a text change. This area will be included as part of the mandatory inclusionary housing areas. It's important to note that both 2 options will be employed here as part of this development. They will be choosing option 1, which requires at least 25% of the residential floor area for incomes averaging 60% AMI, which is roughly about $47,000 a year. And they will also be employing option 2, which requires that at least 30% of the residential floor area be reserved for residents with incomes averaging 80% AMI, which is roughly about $62,000 a year. So the project actually will be developed in 2 phases. Phase 1 will include buildings A, building B, and building D. And phase 2 will include building C and building E. Overall, again, you will have about 832 units of affordable housing. 160 of those units will be supportive housing with supportive services. The buildings will range in height from about 9 to 13 stories, with the exception of building E, which will rise to a height of 25 stories overall. In building B, and I'll talk about all these in detail, will include the underground parking, about 209 spaces. We will also have over 124,000 square feet of community facility space, which will include the YMCA, daycare, and also 50,000, and then about 40,000 square feet of commercial space. So just in terms of the phase development, I'll talk about phase 1 and phase 2 in relation to the specific buildings. So phase 1, again, will include buildings A, buildings B, and building D. Building A will range in height from, street wall height from 8 to 12 stories. It will have about 215 units in total. It will include the YMCA, which will be on the, and 15,000 square feet of retail on the ground floor, and 7,000 square feet of community facility space, which will be on the rooftop. And that will be in, that will be comprised of a rooftop urban farm, which will be run by Grow NYC. They will also have some office space in the building to allow for volunteer space for residents to actually be involved in the growing of fruits, vegetables, and flowers on the rooftop of the building. Building D, located right here, this will be about 8 stories in height total. We'll have 160 units of supportive housing, including 1 superintendent's unit. And it will be specifically for seniors living with HIV and AIDS and single veterans with mental illness. It will also include 4,400 square feet of community facility space that will be used as offices for some nonprofits to provide services for the residents in this building. And the second floor will also include some additional supportive service components for the residents. And this will be run by Community Life, Community Life and Breaking Ground will be running the program. Building entrances will be located on Bergen Avenue and also be located here along the courtyard. And then lastly, in phase 1 will include building B, which is located right here. Building B will be about 8 stories in height total. It will include 281 units of housing. It will also have a 24-hour access television studio, 24-hour access TV studio. So that will also include office space as well as a television studio in building B as well. Phase 2, which will include building C and building E, will also include a daycare. It will also include the tallest building in the development, building E right here, which is about 25 stories. Building C, which is right here, will be about 13 stories. It will include about 137 dwelling units and 8,600 square feet of community facility space. And the community facility space will be comprised of an organization called Music Has No Enemies, which is aimed at social justice. The main entrance for Building C will be on Brook Avenue and will face out into the courtyard, and the community facility entrance will be along Brook Avenue. And Building E, which is the largest, the tallest building here, will have about 198 units of housing. It will also include 2,300 square feet of retail space and about 10,000 square feet of community facility space. On the very top of Building E will include a telescope, which will be remotely operated by the Bronx High School of Science, and will have remote capabilities. And this telescope will allow them to actually transmit information to all high schools throughout the borough of the Bronx and throughout New York City. And Building E will also include on the ground floor daycare space. So these are just partial ground floors. Again, this is buildings B, or buildings D, E, D, C, and E. So community facility space is outlined here in the purple. Yellow is where you have residential, and the pink is commercial components. And again, this is a partial of buildings A and B. Again, in the yellow are the residential spaces. In the pink are commercial, and in the purple are the proposed community facility spaces. So in addition to the previously discussed actions, there are 3 special permits that are being proposed by the applicant. The first are special permits pursuant to ZR 74743A2 and 74738A1. One is to permit the location of buildings without regard to yard and height and setback regulations. And the second is a permit distribution of required open space within the large scale without regard to the zoning lot lines. And then the second special permit pursuant to 74744B is to permit residential and non-residential uses to be arranged on the second floor within building B without regard to location regulations. So this is the waiver plan for building A. Building A, outlined here in the orange, are the waivers that will be required for front height and setback. It will exceed the maximum permitted street wall height of 85 feet. It will also encroach into the required setback, and it will also penetrate the sky exposure plane. And in addition to that special permit outlined here in the blue is a special permit for an encroachment into the rear yard. Pursuant to zoning, a permitted obstruction of 1 story may not exceed 23 feet in height, and the rear yard will commence here for this building at a height of 25 feet 4 inches. For building B, they also will require waivers. These are related to front height and setback, and then also encroachment. Again, this will penetrate, this will go above the maximum permitted street wall height of 85 feet. This building will also encroach into the 15-foot required setback and will also penetrate the sky exposure plane. And for buildings C and D, both buildings will, and outlined here again in the orange, both buildings will exceed the maximum permitted street wall height. Both will encroach into the 15-foot required setback, and both buildings will penetrate the sky exposure plane. And lastly, for building E, again, it will also require waivers. Again, this is the tallest building here, so they require waivers to be penetrating the sky exposure plane and also to exceed the maximum street wall height. So the second permit, which is a waiver plan for building B, so the developer selected will lease about 12,000 square feet of floor area in building B as use group 10, which we use as a television studio and offices for this 24 public access television studio. 8,100 square feet of the studio will be located on the ground floor of building B, and 4,400 square feet will be located on the second floor. Pursuant to zoning, a use group 10 television studio on a story below the lowest story occupied in whole or part by dwelling units. There will be dwelling units on the first and second stories of the building in the form of duplex masonettes that will front out onto the 50-foot pedestrian corridor. The masonettes will each have their separate entrances onto the pedestrian corridor, and the TV studio will also have a separate entrance that will be outside of the building on Westchester Avenue. There will be no opening of any kind between the TV studio and the residential portions of building B. So the last special permit is related to open space and permitting open space without regard for zoning lot lines and distribution of required open space. So this parcel right here, which includes buildings B, C, D, and E, generates a requirement of open space about 64,000 square feet, 64,277 square feet. However, they will only be providing 60,000 square feet of open space pursuant through the courtyard and the rooftop open spaces. Again, open spaces at grade are in the dark green. Open spaces that are located on the roofs of the buildings are located in this hatch green here in the diagram. Parcel C right here, which is the most northern parcel, will be actually a public skate park. It will be publicly accessible, and they will be utilizing about 4,000 square feet of open space of this parcel to satisfy their open space requirement for parcel A. So in total, parcel A will provide 64,000 square feet of open space. Parcel B, which is building A right here, will provide about 22,000 square feet of open space. That also includes the rooftop garden and the urban farm. And then this parcel C, which is the skate park, will provide 7,000 a little over 7,000 square feet of open space. It's important to note here that in this area right here in parcel A, it will include a courtyard that will link both the public between Bergen and Brook Avenue. There will also be a pedestrian corridor, which will be located here through East 152nd Street. In the courtyard will include things such as, planted areas, a lawn, planting beds, as well as cobblestone pavers and a curving pattern. They will also include a fenced play space with play equipment, a sand pit, and artificial turf mounds. It's important to note that the courtyard will serve as a landscape recreation space for residents as well as for the public. The portion of the courtyard immediately adjacent to buildings C and E will be gated and will only be accessible to residents with keys. So this area through here will be accessible. There will be gates that will keep the open space that is just for the residents, public, and they won't be able to access with a key as a resident to the building. So this is an aerial view of the project looking northwest. You can see, again, here, this is the tallest building, Building E. You can kind of see the telescope right here at the very top here. Again, this is Building A. You've got Building D here, Building B, and Building C. This is a view looking east on Westchester Avenue. So you can kind of see the YMCA here right at the corner. And then lastly, you have a view looking north on Bergen Avenue. And here you can see again, this is a view, an illustration of the YMCA on the ground floor, really activating that space and creating vitality at the ground floor. So this project, an environmental review was conducted in accordance with City Environmental Quality Review process. An EAS and a draft scope of work and a DEIS was prepared, and a positive declaration was issued on October 5th, 2015. A public scoping hearing was held on November 4th, 2015 to hear comments to the draft scope, and written comments were accepted through November 16th of 2015. The DES found potential significant adverse impacts in the following categories: community facilities, public schools, and in transportation. Mitigation measures have been identified to fully mitigate impacts in all categories except for community facilities. The potential for additional mitigation measures for community facilities will be explored through between DEIS and the FBIS.
Thank you, Paul. One question. The applicant is employing option 1 and 2.
They're going to be employing option 1 and 2. So
Did they know which buildings?
yes, so I'll go back. So option 1. Let me go back, sorry. Option 1 will include buildings A, B, and D, and then option 2 will include buildings C and E.
Thank you. Questions?
Yes.
Mr. Knuckles?
Great presentation, Paul. Go out asking, leave them asking for more. With regard to the affordability, 25% at 60% AMI, 30% at 80% AMI. So the remaining 45% would be presumably,
So we're mapping MIH here. But they've given me, now this is a draft, there's a range of units here. So the units range from 40% AMI and they'll go way up to 130. Now these are still, it's in draft form, and as they go through financing, some of the numbers may change, but there is a range of units here. But as a minimum here, to apply affordability here, both of those options will be employed here to mandate that affordability be required in this area. But they're kind of going above and beyond what is actually going to be mapped here as part of MIH.
so these two ranges would ultimately span the entire, all of the units?
Yes, so again, so option 1, which is, option 1 will be buildings A, B, and D.
Yeah.
And then option 2 is going to be buildings C and E. And again, option 1 is 25% at 60% AMI, and then option 2 is 30% at 80% AMI. And again, for option 1, that would mean around $47,000, average of $47,000. And then option 2, that would take you to about $62,000 a year, average.
But the regulatory agreement will, at least initially, everything will be affordable?
Yes, that's my understanding. All affordable.
Ms. Efron.
I have a comment and a question. The comment is, what a great diversity of Bronx organizations that are coming together.
Yeah.
I'm curious who the operator is for the television station.
I
But-
don't know.
BronxNet,
BronxNet.
Oh, Bronx, okay.
cable access.
Okay. And then you mentioned phase one for option one, which is A, B, and D, and phase two for option two, which is C and E. How quickly will they be phased? What is it anticipated?
That's all right.
Trying to get a sense of the
If you bear with me
aggregate.
one second, I have
impact
my-
on the
I have my-
neighborhood.
I think I have my cheat notes here. So, I read. So phase one, they are anticipating that phase one will take about 7 months from actual construction. So they're hoping to commence in July, about 7 months total, construction of building six. So from about 2017 to 2019 for, is that correct? No? Okay. Okay,
Starting I couldn't hear it.
so option one, phase one, December, phase two, the following December. Yes.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Cantor.
Thank you. Good presentation, Paul. We're going to miss you. As a follow-up to Ms. Efron, is there a development plan by the applicant that's going to show this phasing? And further to that, how is the phasing going to relate to the open space requirement?
So
The
for
open
the,
space requirement's going to be built out as the job is being built out, or at the end?
so a
or what?
portion of the open space has been designed already, and so that's already in process. And then there will be, for the portion that hasn't been designed, which I believe will relate to this portion right here, there will be a chair certification that will be part of restricted declaration for that open space as it gets developed.
But timing-wise, I'm not talking about the design itself.
Sure.
Timing-wise, is the open space going to be built somewhat on a similar schedule to the high-rise? Or is it a delay at the end of the job? Or something in between?
That's a good question. I will confirm with the applicant, but my assumption would be that it would have to be something in between because they're going to be building these buildings here, and I'm assuming they're going to want to tenant them and have them functional. So, for example, I'm assuming this space, this open space will be completely, built out. This open space may be partially done here, and so, but I will confirm that with the applicant in terms of how they're going to phase the
My
open space
interest is
development.
that there is some open space for the people as the job goes along.
Sure, so, I mean, the other thing that I think that's important for these is that, if you go to, so just in terms of, so all of these will have, access on the rooftop as well as on the ground floor. So, for example, this building will have, open space on the rooftop. There will also be open space on the terraces. And so this, for example, this building A will have the urban farm, so that will be open space. There'll also be terraces with open space in this building, as well as for this development, and then for building E right here. So they have their individual open spaces on the roofs of the building, and they also have open space that will be available at grade.
Thank you.
Ms. Levin, and then Ms. Ortiz.
Yes, thank you for this, Paul, and congratulations. Do we get to hear you back when we get to public review? Do you show up again for the community board? I don't think so.
You will see me. You will see me.
Just one technical question about the parking and then a question about the building design. I noticed that they're putting in substantially more parking than is required, and
Yeah.
I'm curious about why that is happening at this
Sure.
transit-rich location after the
Sure.
exercise that we've just gone through over.
That's a fair question. So I think there's a few things. I think one of the things here is that, so there's a few different reasons. So if you go back to, there's some surface parking that's actually owned by the city. It's actually being subleased to Sober at this moment. So once this gets developed, this building will be demolished, and these 50 spaces will cease to exist. In addition, in terms of the affordability level and be able to attract at a higher income level, the development team feels strongly that having parking as an amenity is important. And then I also think, and then thirdly, both the Third Avenue bid as well as Sobro and area residents have have advocated for more public parking as part of the development. And I think lastly, the YMCA, although it's going to be located here in a neighborhood, they're also seeing it more as a regional amenity, and they're estimating that in peak periods, they would need about 90 parking spaces. So I think all of those things in concert sort of, present a rationale for them providing the parking. that they
Okay, so
provide
this
as part of the development.
just emphasizes what people kept being told when we were doing the ZQA hearing and people were afraid that parking was going away altogether, and the answer always was that developers can include what they think makes sense for their project.
Sure, and I mean,
There you go.
pursuant to zoning, they would only be required to provide about 59 spaces for the residential. In a C62, commercial and community facility spaces have no
Right.
requirement, so.
Okay, so my design question is, I realize that this is so close to Villa Verde, and one of the hallmarks of Villa Verde was the emphasis on active design, healthy, designing for healthy lifestyles, and also for sustainability. And some of these, and I'm curious about the extent to which any of those features will be included in the design here. I saw there was a lot of solar arrays on the rooftops in the renderings. What's their plan for those two design features?
I don't know the full plan in detail, but the applicant team is here, so they will certainly be able to speak more in detail about all of those features. I do think, as you can see here, in the ground floor plan, the idea really is to activate all of these spaces. This is the last development parcel as part of the Rochester Urban Renewal Plan. So it's really sort of critical, and you see locationally, if you look at this picture, sort of where it is located. So you can see here, you've got all of these things that are happening sort of around it. So it really is important to activate those spaces, having the Y, having the retail. The television studio will be all glass. They'll be on the ground floor of the building as well. All of these spaces, and if you look at the open space plan, I think all of these spaces will have, you've got active spaces on the roofs of these buildings. You've got the urban farm, as well as open space that'll be accessible just to the residents at grade for all of the buildings.
Okay. There are also some features, though, that can be included into the design of the building for the residents, namely making it easy to use stairs,
I'm making a
air
note.
circulation,
Sure.
it's the usual recipe, but
Sure.
this area of the Bronx has been such a flagship for improvements in building design on those fronts. It would be great to see this one continue, and maybe we'll hear more about that when it comes back through public review.
I'm sure you will. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Ms. Ortiz?
Hi, thank you for a really great presentation, a good project. I have some questions around the retail.
Yes.
One, if you could just clarify for me, you've got, there's community facility, you've got commercial floor area. I wasn't sure what uses were being counted towards, specifically towards the commercial. Is it TV studio? Where does that fall?
So I think the TV studio is being counted toward community facility space, as well as building D, which is where all the supportive housing and services, I think that also is being counted all toward community facility space.
Okay, so right now, the commercial is, there's no expectation of any particular tenant, because it's pretty
Yeah,
far
I
out
don't
in
believe
advance.
so. I think they're still working that out. I think what we do know specifically is, from the community facility perspective, is the Y. You've also got the music has no enemies, and then obviously, the television studio. But I believe the retail is still to be determined in terms of the actual tenants.
Okay. So I'm not too familiar with this area. I do know that Third Avenue is a very strong retail
Yes.
presence.
So sorry. Let me go back. This is a better. So, Westchester Avenue right here, very strong, and Third Avenue are all very strong retail corridors. There, and the area is continuing to evolve and change in terms of active retail, so,
So is it fair to say that developing this site links the retail on Westchester to the
sure, I think
retail on
absolutely. I think
Third?
what it does is it really begins to, where this is located, it's kind of sort of in between all these things. So it really begins to bring all this together. If you look here,
Oh.
also along East 149th Street, this is the Opera House Hotel, which also has the ground floor, has a gym in there. There's also restaurants that line along here as well. You got Roberto Clemente Plaza. This area right here is the hub. So you've got a nexus of transit in terms of the 2 and the 5 and the buses, and you've got a lot of retail here along Westchester and also along Third Avenue. So it really does kind of bring kind of this all together, and also connects cities through Westchester and also through East of 152nd Street, so bringing these neighborhoods together.
Okay. And is there, one of the issues is always the concern about vacancy.
do we have any issues with vacancy along Third or Westchester?
So there are some vacancies there. I don't know the full number. What I would say is that some of the issues has to do just in terms of the spaces themselves and lending themselves to sort of, 21st century in terms of technology and things like that. So I think the benefit of this new development is that you'd be able to develop these spaces in a way that actually can attract the type of retail tenants that you would want here. I also think that, HPD has done a lot of work in terms of researching sort of the ideal, optimal ground floor retail spaces, sizing, and those kind of things. And I think a lot of that will factor into how we tenanted not only spaces here, but in future developments that HPD sponsors and finances.
So have the design guidelines been incorporated in the design for the
Sure.
ground
So,
floor space here?
well, what I will say for sure is that HPD has their internal process, and they have some guidelines in terms of some minimum requirements. I can certainly have the applicant team talk more specifically about active design guidelines and just design overall and how that's been incorporated into the development.
And just finally, I had heard that there were vacancies at Villa Verde, they were struggling to fill them. Is that no longer the case? Are they fully tenanted?
That I can find out. That I don't know for sure.
It's just something to think about because, is there sufficient demand to support 50,000 new square feet of retail? Here,
I
if we
think
have
this
some
is-
vacancies at Villa Verde. That's just I'd like to know a little bit more on that.
Yeah, I don't know that there's I don't know that, we can certainly confirm the vacancies. I don't know that there's probably a lot. I did a tour there a couple of years ago, and as far as I know, it's fully tenanted. But these neighborhoods are pretty dense, and I think they're, in terms of getting new retail and active retail and having a Y as an anchor is something that these communities really want and desire, and I also think need.
Thank you.
Yeah, Westchester.
Any other questions?
Like 148. Yeah, that's the-
If not, certified. Thank you, Paul. Good luck.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you all.
Okay, let's now go on to item number 2, page 81, proposed special permit zoning text amendment and an authorization to facilitate a mixed-use building with accessory parking at 217 West 29th Street. Now, presenter is Richard Suarez of the Manhattan office on item number 2, page 81.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Sorry, I'm getting over a cold or something, so like the rest of the world, so sorry. This is a private application for a special permit, a zoning text amendment, and an authorization to facilitate a new mixed-use development with the existing parking lot at 217 West 29th Street. The applicant specifically requests a special permit pursuant to sections 1345 and 13451A for additional parking spaces for residential growth to allow 26 additional residential parking spaces beyond the 19 permitted as of right, a zoning text amendment to the M160 regulations establishing a new section 42486 to modify the retail frontage requirements of section 42485, and an authorization pursuant to that new section 42486 to reduce the development's required retail frontage from 50% to 37%. 217 West 29th Street, which is here in the center of the map, is located on the north side of West 29th Street between 7 avenues, just east of the Chelsea neighborhood within Community District 5, 2 blocks south of Madison Square Garden and Penn Station. The site is located in the city's first M160 zoning district, which is characterized by a mix of loft-like office and light manufacturing buildings with a strong street wall condition among a number of surface parking lots. Building heights in the area range from 2 to 17 stories with dormers and multiple setbacks, and the M160 regulations are intended to encourage this pre-war built fabric while introducing new residential development and preserving existing amounts of affordable commercial and manufacturing space. Ground floor uses along the street and in the area are commonly used for a mix of retail, community facility, and wholesale uses. Parking and auto uses are not uncommon in the area, with 3 surface parking lots located on the north side of the block. So this shows the proposed development, but this is a surface parking lot. We have one just east of the site, to the west, also on the north side of the block. We also have one outside of the district, and then a large surface parking lot on the south side of the street, just west of the site. It is this site here that is expected to be developed for residential use, and that proposal facilitated the department's study and eventual rezoning of the area from M15 to M160 in 2011. The site itself is an existing surface parking lot with a capacity for 48 parking spaces with stackers. The zoning lot, which comprises of 2 tax lots, has approximately 70 feet of frontage on the street and measures 6,896 square feet in area. So zooming in a bit more, you get a sense of the built form of the nearby buildings. You see this 100% lot coverage buildings with multiple setbacks. The development site itself is approximately 200 feet west of 7th Avenue, and the closest subway stations are off the map and located to the south at West 28th and 7th Avenue, and to the north at Penn Station. West 29th Street is a narrow street that carries westbound traffic with a painted bike lane on the south side of the street. The applicant proposes to develop the existing surface parking lot with a 21-story, 95-unit residential building with ground floor retail and 45 accessory parking spaces on the ground floor and sub-cellar levels. The building would have a street wall along West 29th Street that rises to a height of 125 feet, above which dormers would be located within the required 15-foot setback, and then would rise to an overall building height of 210 feet. That's the mechanical space above. All of which is consistent with the M160 bulk regulations. Along the ground floor would be frontage dedicated to a retail use. So we'd have retail use here for 26 feet, a residential lobby for about 11 feet, and then a garage entrance for about 16 feet. The building would contain approximately 79,000 square feet of floor area for an FAR of 11.47. As part of the M160 rezoning, the area was mapped as a designated inclusionary housing area, so buildings containing residential uses may exceed a base FAR of 9 through the provision of a combination of commercial use and affordable housing. The proposed development will dedicate 20% of the building's floor area, or 15,770 square feet, or 19 units, as permanently affordable units. In order to facilitate the proposed development, a parking special permit is required to exceed the permitted number of accessory parking spaces. A zoning text amendment is required to create a mechanism to modify the retail frontage requirements of the M160 regulations, and an authorization pursuant to that proposed zoning text amendment is required to allow the commission to reduce the required retail frontage on the site. So first I'll go through the parking special permit, and then I'll go into the retail modifications. So the applicant proposes to provide 45 accessory residential parking spaces on the ground floor and sub-cellar levels of the development. The garage would have a 16-foot entrance here. That would be serviced by a 20-foot curb cut with splays. And entering vehicles would along West 29th Street would turn right and then proceed down a ramp, which there would then be 2 reservoir spaces located at the bottom. An attendant would either park a vehicle on the ground floor where there are 3 parking spaces, 2 of which are ADA spaces, or would use the car elevator here to take you down to the sub-cellar level where there are proposed to be 42 spaces. 19 of these spaces would be on a surface level, and the remaining 23 would be elevated. So we have 2 plans here that are also including your packages. We have a surface level plan, and then we kind of have this mid-air kind of elevated, this is the tray level. It's a very tight space, so we figured that 2 plans would be appropriate. So given the limited space within the subcellar, the applicant is proposing to use a system of movable post trays that uses a mix of ceiling and floor mounted posts to free up maneuvering space on the surface level. And this will allow for the efficient retrieval and relocation of vehicles. So the applicant proposes to lay out the surface spaces in such a manner so that if this were to be filled on the elevated level, that vehicles can be maneuvered and moved around in such a way that it would, an attendant can get these vehicles out very quickly. This is a look at some of those, what those stackers would look like. Normally, these normal stackers would have posts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This system eliminates some of those posts to free up space on the surface level so that cars can move in and out. And then in addition, some of these vertical posts would actually be ceiling mounted to further free up some of the space on the surface level. So when vehicles are to exit, pedestrians will wait in a designated pedestrian waiting zone here for the attendant to retrieve their vehicle. An overhead sign over here would alert the driver to yield to incoming traffic and to wait for a green light. When a vehicle is entering and passes a detection device here, a red light would display here, and then when it comes down the ramp and passes the second detection device, or the rear wheels of that, then the green light would shine here, and then the driver can come up the ramp, come out, make a right, and continue westward onto West 29th Street. Section 1311A of the zoning resolution allows a maximum number of accessory residential parking spaces equal to 20% of the number of dwelling units. Since the proposed development will contain 95 dwelling units, 19 parking spaces are allowed as of right. Within the Manhattan core, a zoning law may provide more residential parking spaces than the as of right amount by special permit pursuant to both sections 1345 and 13451. In order to provide 26 additional parking spaces for a total of 45 spaces, the applicant requests a special permit pursuant to sections 1345 and 13451A, which requires that, in addition to meeting the conditions of section 1320 for curb cuts, reservoir spaces, pedestrian safety, and other provisions, that the applicant demonstrate that the requested number of off-street parking spaces is reasonable and not excessive in relation to recent trends in residential development and the provision of off-street parking in close proximity to the proposed garage. In order to demonstrate that the request for 26 additional parking spaces is reasonable and not excessive, the applicant, using methodology provided by the department, examined the change in residential units and residential parking spaces between 2005 and 2017 within a third mile of the site. So the site is here in the center. This is a third mile. Those dots shown here in blue are sites where there was a change in residential development, so likely an increase in residential units. And those in red are those sites where there's been a change in parking spaces, so likely a loss in parking spaces. And then those sites that have both a blue and a red dot are likely the residential developments that also provided parking on the site. The study showed that during this look-back period, the ratio of new residential parking spaces to new residential units was 9.24%, well below the department's expected growth of 20%. With the addition of 45 parking spaces and 95 residential units, the applicant found that the ratio would increase to 10.5%, still well below 20%. The applicant's discussion of findings, along with the discussion of conditions for section 1320, is included in your briefing packages. Now, the next two actions go hand in hand. The first would be a zoning text amendment to modify the streetscape requirements to create an authorization to modify them. And then the next action is then an authorization pursuant to that text amendment. Section 42485 requires that zoning lots on narrow streets with frontage of 50 feet or more dedicate at least 50% of the street frontage to retail uses for a depth of 30 feet. As it would apply to this site has 69 feet, 10 inches of frontage, which would require 34 feet, 11 inches of frontage for a depth of 30 feet, all for residential use. As a consequence of locating a garage entrance, a lobby with just enough room for a revolving door and a fixed door for accessibility and required egress, the applicant has indicated that only 25 feet, 11.5 inches of retail frontage can be provided, which is equal to 37% of the total frontage. So here is the proposed retail space in pink. It has 25 feet, 11.5 inches of frontage. And then this hatched area shows what would then be a compliant retail establishment pursuant to the regs. You'll notice that there's a residential lobby here, and then there's egress around the core here, and then egress coming out onto the street. Furthermore, the applicant has indicated that the core placement, which is constrained by the depth of the floor plates resulting from the M160 bulk regulations, prevents the retail space from achieving the required 30 feet depth. So again, this would be 30 feet. This comes down to about 27, 28 feet, and then about 18, 19 feet at this instance. The applicant has indicated that this issue is not unique to this site of relatively narrow frontage, where parking may be provided as of right. Through a series of analyses conducted in consultation with the department, the applicant determined that zoning lots within the M160 district with a frontage of less than 75 feet, such as this site, could find it challenging to provide the required 50% retail frontage and a parking entrance. The applicant notes that a core for a residential building with the density permitted within the M160 district requires 2 elevators and a trash disposal room, which would generally be arranged side by side in a core approximately 30 feet wide. After accounting for exterior wall thickness and seismic separations, the interior clear width of a building would be reduced by approximately 4 feet. For a 50-foot wide lot, this would leave only 16 feet of clear width alongside the core, insufficient to allow for a garage entry of at least 12 feet, plus a passageway from the front of the core to the area behind the core. Such a passageway, as the applicant notes, would be necessary for egress, accessibility, and for use of the area behind the core. As the applicant states, there is insufficient frontage on a narrow lot to dedicate 50% of its retail to frontage while providing both an entrance to a residential lobby and a parking facility. As such, the applicant proposes a zoning text amendment to the M160 regulations to create a new section 42486 that would allow the commission to modify for zoning lots between 50 and 75 feet of frontage the retail frontage and depth requirements of section 42485 in order to provide sufficient space for access to a parking or loading facility. In addition to finding that the modifications are necessary for providing access to a parking or loading facility, the commission must also find that the modification will not adversely affect the streetscape experience, will not impact the viability of such use, and that the resulting ground floor frontage will contribute to a vibrant mixed-use district. With the proposed zoning text amendment that establishes the authorization within new section 42486, the applicant is also requesting that authorization to reduce the amounts of required retail frontage on the development site from 34 feet 11 inches to 25 feet 11.5 inches, or 37%. The requested authorization also includes reductions in the retail depth to accommodate circulation around the core and necessary egress. So again, here's the lobby, here's core around, circulation around the core and also to the street. The applicant notes that the dimensions of the retail space are dictated by the parking facility entrance, the Con Ed vaults here, which dictates the location of the retail entrance, and the required location of the building core. The applicant's statement of findings for the proposed authorization is attached to your briefing packages. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Questions? Mr. Cantor?
Thank you. Is the 45 spaces, are they going to be accessory, are they going to be public?
They are proposed to be accessory, but Manhattan Core does allow these spaces to be made available for public use.
So it would be a transient opportunity.
Yes.
Has anyone considered well, with the transient opportunity comes how much time? You're going back and forth. But my question is really, what is the impact on the neighboring buildings? With cars queuing up, I don't see a very good reservoir area.
Right. So 1320 only requires for a facility this size 2 reservoir spaces. And again, because the facility is very tight, they're using these movable posts, stackers, to clear up space on the ground floor so that in the worst condition, if this was very full, an attendant or attendants could move the cars quickly and get these cars out in a manner that would not cause queuing on the ground floor.
Well, that sounds good, but how do you know that?
This is what the applicant has demonstrated to us. The applicant has indicated that the operator has a lot of experience with operating facilities of similar size, and they could respond to this at the public hearing when it comes back for review.
All right. Okay, thank you.
Ms. Ortiz?
I understand that you have not exceeded the threshold for the parking growth ratio, but I'm just curious, and I couldn't find it anywhere, but what is the parking ratio for, the 1/3 mile, just generally?
Well, with the, as it
on average,
exists today,
what is, yeah.
at this point, I mean, I'd have to reread the analysis. I don't know at this point in time, but in this look-back period, it was about, it was 9.25%. So that's looking at, change over time.
That's looking at change over time.
Right, but as it exists at this moment, I don't
Yeah,
have
just as
the
a point
number.
of comparison,
Right.
because, with this and with others, we're looking at, 1-to-2 parking ratio or 1-to-1 parking ratio even, in areas that really are intended to be, supported by transit, and we certainly don't want to induce demand. So, just as a point of comparison, it would be useful to know what the parking ratio is, and for this and other projects too, so that we can make a more thoughtful determination.
Of course, yeah, we can get the numbers for you. Sorry.
Ms. Delausse, welcome. And then Ms. Levin, and then
Hi,
Ms.
Richard.
Efron.
What's the rationale for wanting the additional parking?
There are currently 48 spaces on site today. It's likely that they want to be able to match the number of spaces that are there. Madison Square Garden is not too far away, and I'm sure that there is a high demand for parking during these special events that take place many days of the week and many weekends, and so I'm sure the pro forma worked out so that it's good to achieve as many spaces as possible. But I'm speculating, and the applicant can really speak to that.
I think one thing that would be helpful just when they come back is just to get a sense of, have they surveyed the current, utilization and how many people, if given the opportunity to return, plan to return. It kind of also goes to your point about current demand versus, anticipation of future demand.
I mean, this is 45 spaces to 95 units, so it's a little different from other examples we've seen, which is closer to 1-to-1.
Thank you.
Ms. Levin, and then Ms. Efron.
Yeah, Richard, I got a little confused about the extent to which this authorization process really was needed, because there's one, and it just has to do with the numbers on the frontage, but there's one point in their statement of findings where they say that there's, if you carve out the building lobby, there is 51 feet of frontage left for retail and the garage entrance, and so the garage entrance is 16 feet, 51 feet minus 16 feet is 35 feet, in which would comply. So maybe we can get some more, I mean, I assume nobody's going through this process if they don't really have to. But I hope we can get a little bit more clarification of how all of the, it may have to do, does it have to do with the size of the columns? There are 4
Yeah, I think-
columns there.
Yeah, I think there's also the egress door.
Well, I
So
think that's included in their, well, whatever.
in our, when we've been working with them, they have not included that in the
Oh,
law.
that's not part
Right.
of the
So-
residential entrance part.
Right, that's correct, right. So you have
Okay.
your entrance,
Okay.
which is partially blocked by the columns. You have your egress, which is also partially blocked by column. And then you have the columns. And, you know, these narrow sites, you know, require these columns to be located in certain spots, as I've been
Yeah.
told, which further, you know, contributes to the lack of, you know, what you can do with the ground.
It seems to me it's really the columns that's driving this more than
I think it's
anything else.
I think it's an important piece that
Yeah.
was not reflected in the applicant's discussion of findings, but I think we as
Yeah, but it's pretty clear if you look at the
Observers.
rendering, makes
Right.
sense. The bay on the right is gonna be all garage. You're not gonna parcel it up for something else.
right.
So that then drives the rest. I'm puzzled about the emphasis on the Con Ed vault. That doesn't affect frontage. You can still put retail frontage. I mean, it controls the garage entrance and the residential lobby entrance, but it doesn't have anything to do with our analysis of the frontage, does it?
It does not affect the frontage itself, but what the applicants explained to us is that it does dictate the location of the door and whether or not a door can be located in front of a Con Ed vault and what happens when Con Ed wants to do work and then has.
It's not the vault grading.
Right.
Yes, the
grading,
grade, yeah,
yes,
but
yes,
that,
access
so
to-
that doesn't have anything to do with our, you know, the retail could be any place along that frontage, it just dictates
It's
the entrance.
the entrance itself. And then, but depending on where the entrance can go and where the lobby can go and where the parking can go
Got
and where the egress can go on
Okay.
a narrow site, there are only so many options that you can lay out the ground floor to provide these.
Okay,
things.
that part I understand. Thank you.
Ms. Efron?
I had a question about the grading also, which was, why couldn't the grading go under the driveway?
That is a good question. I believe it exists today. The grading is there today.
Why couldn't they have flipped the plan and had the driveway go on that side, and therefore have more free and clear room for the retail?
I think this also goes back to the applicant's rationale that the grading dictates where you can put an entrance, and when they say an entrance, they also mean a garage entrance as well. That if Con Ed were to do work and to access this, that they would have to possibly close that garage entrance, and then you couldn't access any of the cars.
Right. Obviously, that doesn't get in the way of my feeling about this, I was just curious, but,
It still grades on you.
but, great summary, exactly. But I will say that this commission has been so proactive in using transit hubs as an opportunity to build office space near Grand Central and to rezone Vanderbilt. And it is a shame that an apartment building so very close to Penn Station and its supplementary great access, particularly as Hudson Yards has been rebuilt and the access to 7, would ask for extra parking. And it's just, I understand why it fits in within the formula, and I respect the excellent presentation. But it's just disappointing that we can't have a corollary opportunity within residential to access and benefit from transit.
I just note that the height of the retail, Richard?
It's approximately 10 feet 4 inches. This is in your package, it's below 12 feet, so it's a little more than 10 feet, closer to 11 maybe.
So if you look at, you know, it is lower proposed than the surrounding retail on the block. And the purpose of 42, 485 was to promote superior retail, and now that ZQA has been enacted, the height, potential allowable height here could be considerably taller than the applicant has proposed.
Right, the ZQA now allows the overall building height when providing affordable units to go up to 235. Then the front wall can go, I believe it's at 125 now, but with the provision of affordable units, you can go to 155 of the front wall.
And more significantly, the ground floor, I mean, this is a good example of why ZQA was so important, because the height restrictions pre-ZQA is what, no doubt, has caused the ground floor retail to be squinched as it. But now that ZQA is enacted, that constraint is no longer present. The entire building could be a lot taller, and certainly the ground floor retail could be significantly taller than is proposed here, and in view of the applicant's request for a waiver of the conditions of 42-485, my question to the applicant is why shouldn't, in order to make as superior retail as possible, the ground floor retail be increased, and whether the proposed new 42-486 shouldn't put a constraint, recognizing the need probably for 486, that it should have some sort of constraint on it that would require an applicant to take advantage of the superior retail that we really intended for ZQA to provide.
Applicant's rep is here and listening very carefully.
Good. So just in terms of, this is a completed application, and it is ready for certification, but just as this comes back to us, I think that those are issues that we should think about. So with that, any other questions about this? Ms. Delos?
Just one brief one. Is the intention to have the affordable housing be on site?
Yes, all on site.
Great.
And they are fitting, they are, in this plan, taking maximum advantage of the FAR, or close to it,
They're at 11.47.
11.47.
The max is 12.
So, and that again probably is due to the height limitations that the mid-block on Narrow Street provides. So the question is, so actually the applicant could provide not only more superior retail, but also more housing generally, and presumably more affordable housing.
That's correct.
And again, that's what ZQA was intended to do. Mr. Knuckles?
I didn't know if it was mentioned. Have we established the rent levels for the,
Yes, a regulatory agreement has already been executed and recorded, and the mix would be, we have 4 studios, 13 one-bed apartments, and 2 two-bed apartments, all at 60% AMIs,
60?
60%.
Okay, with that certified.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So now let's go to item number 3, page 134, proposed special permit to facilitate accessory parking at 70 Vestry Street. We're on item number 3, page 134, and our presenter is Bob Tuttle of the Manhattan office.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Weisbrod, Commissioners. This is a private application for a special permit pursuant to Sections 1345 and 13451 for 42 accessory off-street parking spaces within an as-of-right residential development at 70 Vestry Street in the Tribeca neighborhood of Manhattan Community District 1. The residential development will include 47 market rate units, which would be permitted 9 parking spaces as of right. The project area is a zoning lot that is centered here. It is generally bounded by Desbrosses Street to the north, Washington Street to the east, Vestry Street to the south, and West Street to the west. It consists of lots 3, 13, and 20. And in this blow-up, here's 3. 13 is down here in red. And then 20 is down here in red, and 13 is the orange and gray. The only lot on the block that is not included in the project area is a 4-story mixed-use building on lot 18, which is shown here in purple. The surrounding area's built form is characterized by buildings with strong street walls that range in height from 2 to 15 stories. Uses in the area are predominantly mixed residential, commercial, or all residential uses. Interspersed among these uses are office, parking facility, and manufacturing uses. The surrounding area east of West Street is within the special Tribeca mixed-use district, also known as the TMU. The regulations in the TMU modify the underlying zoning with special regulations and, with special use regulations and bulk provisions. The eastern portion of the project area is zoned C6-2A, all this area over here. And the western portion is C6-3A, that's a strip down here. The C6-2A district regulations are augmented by the TMU's A5 designation, which allows for a maximum FAR of 5.5 for all permitted uses. The maximum building height is 110 feet, and the base height must be between 60 feet and 70 feet. The C6-3A district regulations are augmented by the TMU's A4 designation, which allows for a maximum FAR of 6.5 for all permitted uses. The maximum building height is 140 feet, with a further 10-foot penthouse permitted. The base height must be a minimum of 60 feet and a maximum of 70 feet. An M23 district is located across West Street along the Hudson River, over here. This district permits a wide range of manufacturing and commercial uses. However, this area is now the Hudson River Park and is primarily a recreational area. The project area contains 35,657 square feet of lot area and generates 216,501 square feet of floor area. No floor area will be transferred from lot 13 or 20 to the development site on lot 3. Adjacent to the project area is the Tribeca North Historic District. This was designated in 1992, and this historic district is one of 4 that cover the Tribeca neighborhood and seeks to preserve the period architecture of loft and mercantile buildings commonly found in this area of Manhattan. Local streets in this area are all one-way. Along Washington, traffic flows in a northbound direction. Along Greenwich Street, it flows in a southbound direction. Desbrosses is westbound, and Vestry is eastbound. West Street and Canal Street, which are the area's 2 main arterial roadways, both allow two-way traffic. The nearest subway stations, which are beyond the extent of this map, are east of the surrounding area at Canal Street and Varick Street, which provides access to the 1 train, and at Canal Street and Avenue of the Americas, which provides access to the A, C, and E trains. The applicant intends to construct a 12-story with penthouse, 47-unit residential building on the development site. The total zoning floor area of the building will be 153,690 square feet, comprised of 152,861 square feet of residential floor area and 829 square feet of community facility or commercial floor area. The development will also include 13,710 gross square feet of parking space and 17,038 square feet of storage, amenity, and mechanical space. These will be located in the building's cellar and subcellar levels. The building will rise to a height of 149 feet, and its street walls will be built to the street line. The proposed development is within the 100-year floodplain, with a base flood elevation of +12. Pursuant to zoning and building code regulations, the entire building will be constructed so that all habitable space will be at a design flood elevation of at least +13. The building is as of right, with the exception of the parking facility, which is the subject of this application. Vehicles will enter the parking facility from DeBrosa Street, make a left into the facility over a 15-foot curb cut with splays, through an automated parking facility and into an interior courtyard. Well, they will come to this queuing area where there will be a stoplight that will inform the motorist if the vehicle entry bay is available for parking the vehicle. Once the bay is available, the vehicle will move into the bay, the motorist will exit the vehicle, and an automated system will store the vehicle. Upon retrieval of the vehicle, which is done through a kiosk system, the motorist would exit the entry bay through the interior courtyard, go to a stop sign and speed bump, through another automated door, through over a 15-foot curb cut with splays, and then enter eastbound traffic on Reade Street. The automated parking facility will include a 24.5-foot deep, 16-foot wide entry bay, which is shown here. This will serve as an auto elevator lift within the interior courtyard at ground floor of the building. The automated parking facility will have a total of 42 parking spaces. 21 will be on the cellar level, and then an identical setup on the sub-cellar level. And over here is the amenity space. The automated parking system within the parking facility is designed for automated storage and retrieval of vehicles in high-density parking facilities and allows for the storage and retrieval of vehicles through self-guided technology. Pursuant to Section 1311A, only 9 parking spaces are permitted as of right for this development. In order to provide the 42 accessory off-street parking spaces proposed, a special permit is requested pursuant to Sections 1345 and 13451. Among the requirements of these special permits, the applicant must demonstrate that the requested number of off-street parking spaces is reasonable and not excessive in relation to the provision of off-street parking in recent residential developments within close proximity of the proposed development. In order to demonstrate the request for 42 parking spaces is reasonable and not excessive, the applicant, using methodology provided by the department, examined the change in residential units and residential parking spaces between 2004 and 2018, which is the project's expected build year. Shown here in the 1/3 mile radius is the development site here. The applicant analyzed 52 residential developments, which is denoted by a green circle, and found a net increase of 1,600 dwelling units. The applicant also analyzed 18 parking facilities, which is denoted by a red circle, and found a net decrease of nearly 400 parking spaces. Instances in which a green and red dot overlap indicates that the site was analyzed for both its number of dwelling units and residential parking spaces. The study showed that during this look-back period, the ratio of new residential units to new residential parking space was negative 24%. With the addition of 42 parking spaces and 47 residential units, as proposed by the applicant, the ratio would increase to negative 21%, well below the department's 20% growth rate. The applicant's discussion of conditions for Section 1320 and statement of findings for Sections 1345 and 13451 are included in the briefing package, and I'm happy to answer questions at this time.
Any questions? Ms. Efron and Ms. Ortiz.
Sorry. I assume this wouldn't be public parking, this would just be for the apartment building?
It is.
And
It's
so my
residential.
question's sort of predicated on that. In new construction like this, it's not unheard of for building units to be combined, particularly in this high-end portion of the market. Would the number of spaces be reduced? It's pretty close to a 1-to-1 ratio.
Yeah, it's 90%.
If an apartment became several units put together, would there be a corresponding reduction in the amount of parking spaces?
Not that I have been informed of by the applicant, but I can certainly check on that.
I will point out that the apartments, on average, are pretty large as is. So if they're combined, my guess is that the family that combines them will have 3 or 4 cars, at least.
Yeah, the largest unit is 7 bedroom. They also could use parking spaces for residential complexes around them, but this is really designed for these residences.
Ms. Ortiz.
Hi, this is, has come up a few times, and I understand the methodology is part of some of the concern that I have, but, you know, we again are looking at a building that's going in a, you know, transit-rich environment, Manhattan. I'm not sure precisely where the nearest subway is, but, you know, we're moving forward with a one-to-one parking ratio practically. I'm curious what, you know, the parking ratio is for that neighborhood, generally, not the growth rate, but the parking ratio, because it's sort of like death by a thousand cuts. Every developer is gonna begin to want the same thing, and we are, you know, we're looking at inducing demand and creating a neighborhood where people are, have an expectation where they're gonna have a parking space. You know, this is Manhattan. I would hope that, you know, we can look at this a little differently, and I don't know whether there's an opportunity to rethink this methodology. I think that's a big request, but I continue to have issues with these one-to-one parking ratios in Manhattan.
Right. One thing I can say is that in their analysis, they did look at the 52 residential developments over the look-back period, and there was still a negative number of parking spaces. It wasn't just the fact that parking facilities have closed in the area, but we can definitely find what the actual ratio is right now.
I just want to add that the target is 20% permitted. So that's what's allowed. And this will be the 9th special permit in 3 years through the residential growth. So we've been averaging about 3 a year.
Yeah, no, I understand that.
Ms. Levin?
Yeah, I actually have another question, but on that question, I don't think we have an expected growth rate of 20%. It's an expected ratio, target ratio of 20%. So I'm a little confused about how it's presented here.
So I was reading that as growth rate.
Yeah, but I don't think that's what we,
So they're permitted 20% of the dwelling units. So
Correct.
that's the basis of what the residential growth parking study is at.
right.
So that's the cutoff where we look at when they do the look back in the study.
Yeah, but so the last bullet here refers to a department's expected
Yeah,
growth of 20%.
That's not correct.
That's not correct.
That's a
Okay.
mistake.
I will say how, I'm troubled by the overall assumption about 100% parking, but I will say that with this site right on the West Side Highway, Route 9A is probably, if you're ever going to have a 100% parking building, that's a perfectly good place for it to be. But I do have a question about the orientation of the entrance and the exit, because I would have thought, just looking at a map, that the easiest point of access, and most people are going to be using their cars to travel distances going up and down the West Side Highway, you can make a left turn. If you're going southbound on the West Side Highway, you can make a left onto Vestry, and you can also get onto Vestry if you're coming north. So that's double the access. Why is the orientation of the entrance and exit planned in the opposite direction?
I don't know. We can ask the applicant that. I know that there are curb cuts currently on West Street, and they're removing all of those.
Right.
So this,
Yeah, it just seems that it will keep the most cars off of, you know, inlet, upland streets if the access point is closest to the highway, rather than requiring you to loop around. And you can't even loop around and well, I guess you can loop around and come up Washington, but that's just two sides of a square more than you should have to do. Yeah.
Any other questions for Bob? Okay, certified.
thank you.
Item number 4, page 188, proposed authorization and a modification to a previously approved chairperson restrictive declaration to facilitate residential use at 7 East 19th Street. Our presenter is Sarah Elmore, the Manhattan office. Item number 4, page 188.
Good afternoon, Chairman Weisbrod, Commissioners. This is a private application by 7 East 19 LLC, which proposes to convert the 2nd through 5th floors of an existing commercial building at 7 East 19th Street from commercial use to residential use by authorization pursuant to Section 1520B of the zoning resolution to waive the floor area requirements of Section 1521. Section 1521 requires a chairperson certification to convert a portion of a building to residential use so long as a third of the floor area is retained for manufacturing or commercial use. The requested authorization would result in 21% of commercial floor area. The application is simultaneously requesting a chairperson approval for termination of an existing restrictive declaration that was recorded against the site in 1996 in connection to a prior chairperson certification granted in 1996. Okay. So the site is situated at the southeasterly edge of the Flatiron District and the easterly edge of the Ladies Mile Historic District. The site is situated on a 2,300 square foot interior lot right here and is on the north side of East 19th Street between Broadway and Fifth Avenue, with Madison Square Park to the north and Union Square Park to the south. The surrounding area north, south, and east of the site is located within the Ladies Mile Historic District and is characterized by mid to high-rise loft-style buildings with a mix of commercial and residential uses. The site and much of the surrounding area is located within an M15M zoning district, which permits a maximum FAR of 5. However, there are few industrial or light manufacturing uses. The district generally extends from 100 feet east of Fifth Avenue to 100 feet west of Park Avenue South and extends from East 22nd Street to the south of East 18th Street. The surrounding area to the east of the site along Park Avenue South is primarily residential with ground floor retail. The avenue frontage on Park Avenue South is zone C64A and is in the limited height district. The avenue frontages along Fifth Avenue are zone C64M. The site is served by the N and R at 23rd Street and Broadway, the 6 train at 23rd Street and Park Avenue South. The F, M, and PATH trains are also accessible in a short walking distance at 23rd Street and 6th Avenue. The site is also served by multiple bus routes on 3rd and 5th Avenue, Park Avenue South, and 23rd Street. The site is developed with a 5-story commercial building with approximately 10,943 square feet of zoning floor area, which is 4.76 FAR. This building rises to a height of 78 feet. As mentioned earlier, this building is located in the Ladies Mile Historic District and is described as a cast iron neo-brick store-fronted building by the Landmarks Preservation Commission, or LPC. The building was the building was designed by Thomas R. Jackson and constructed in 1885 to 1886. And the building's style, scale, material, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Ladies Mile Historic District. Historically, the building was used for storage for Lord & Taylor, showroom and warehouse space, and photo studios. The building is currently vacant. On July 5th, 1996, the site was granted a chairperson certification pursuant to Section 1521 to convert floors 3, 4, and 5 to residential use from commercial use. A restrictive declaration was recorded against the site as a result, preserving the first and second stories, or about 4,350 square feet for commercial conforming uses. Construction to convert floors 3 through 5 to residential has commenced. The applicant proposes to convert the 2nd through 5th floors of the existing building to residential use. The existing building will contain 2,300 zoning square feet of commercial floor area, or 1 FAR, on the ground floor, and 8,630 zoning square feet of residential floor area, or 3.7 FAR, on floors 2 through 5, with 1 residential floor per unit. The 5th floor dwelling unit will be a double-level penthouse, which will include an enclosed rooftop recreation area. This enclosed rooftop recreation is allowed as of right through a bulk transfer of floor area from a mezzanine that will be demolished between the 1st and 2nd story. The mezzanine that is to be demolished has 443 square feet of zoning floor area, and the rooftop recreation addition will have 430 square feet of zoning floor area, so there'll be an overall decrease of 13 square feet of zoning floor area, from 10,943 to 10,930 square feet. The Department of Buildings has issued a work permit for the floor area transfer, and LPC has reviewed and approved the rooftop recreation addition. Additionally, a portion of the cellar will be converted as residential accessory storage. The proposed development will include an exterior facade renovation and an interior residential conversion to occupy an existing vacant building with residential use on the 2nd through 5th floors with ground floor commercial use. A certificate of appropriateness was issued on December 1st, 2015 to recreate the missing masonry features on the front facade and to install storefront infill. The restoration of the front facade will include the recreation of the missing building cornice here, and as well as the storefront cornice located right here, and ornamental features at the lateral piers of floors 2 through 5 right here. There will also be in order to create the new wood storefront infill, the existing storefront infill metal roll-down doors, as you can see right here, will be removed. However, the historic cast iron piers will be preserved. Additionally, a Landmarks Preservation Commission restrictive declaration will be recorded against the property to bind the owner to perform the continuing maintenance on the facade and exterior architectural elements of the existing building to maintain its historic character. The applicant, 7 East 19 LLC, is seeking an authorization pursuant to Section 1520B to modify the floor area preservation requirements of Section 1521 so that residential uses can be permitted on the 2nd through 5th floors of the existing building. Residential uses are not permitted as of right in an M1 5M zoning district, but may be permitted by chairperson certification pursuant to Section 1521, provided that at least a third of the building's floor area is preserved for manufacturing or commercial use in that building. Since the existing building contains 10,943 square feet of zoning floor area, Section 1521 requires a minimum of 3,647 feet of zoning floor area to be preserved for conforming manufacturing or commercial use to convert any portion of that building to residential use. However, entire floors must be preserved, so 4,350 square feet on the 1st and 2nd floor were preserved in the chairperson's certification granted to the site in 1996. A restrictive declaration was recorded against that property in connection with the certification to serve as a legal commitment for the preservation. So this right here is the as-of-right option that they can do with the certification that they received in 1996, plus with the approval from DOB and Landmarks permission to create this double-level penthouse on the 5th floor. The CPC may modify the provisions of Section 1521 by authorization pursuant to 1520B for buildings that are LPC designated landmarks or located within a historic district. Since the existing building is located within the Ladies Mile Historic District, the proposed authorization would permit a modification of the preservation requirements pursuant to Section 1521 to allow for 2,300 square feet or 21% of commercial use on the ground floor and the conversion of floors 2 through 5 to residential for a total of 8,630 square feet of residential floor area. In addition to a building being an individual landmark or located within a historic district, the following conditions must be met in order to be eligible for an authorization pursuant to Section 1520B. A certificate of appropriateness, or C of A, or other permit may be granted by the LPC for any proposed alterations in connection with residential conversion. LPC must issue a report establishing a continuing maintenance plan that will result in the preservation of the building and must comply with the density requirements of pursuant to Section 74-711A3. Furthermore, the Planning Commission must find that waiving the preservation requirements will have a minimal adverse impact on the conforming uses in the building or in the surrounding area. The C of A, LPC report, and applicant's discussion of conditions and findings are included in your briefing package. The proposed authorization will replace the previously mentioned certification granted in 1996. The proposed authorization to convert the 2nd through 5th floors of the existing building conflicts with the use restrictions in the restrictive declaration recorded against the property in connection to the 1996 chairperson certification, which requires that the 1st and 2nd floor be preserved for commercial uses. So the existing declaration must be terminated. Since the existing declaration can only be terminated or modified with approval of the chairperson of the Planning Commission, the applicant is also seeking chairperson approval for the termination of the existing declaration in connection with this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Ms. Efron, then Ms. Delos.
No, please, you can go first. So we're really talking about the 2nd floor.
Pretty much, yeah.
I'm relatively new to the precedent game, but it seems to me that it would be really useful to have a general understanding of how many more of these are likely to come before us if we do this one.
Well, I mean, there's one already that's happened. I mean, and this is also something similar. There's the 74-711 and plus the 1521. The certification is just slightly different. Like, this is always an option. the difference is that you're able to get some sort of work in like continuing maintenance for historic purposes. So there was one that happened, I can't remember the exact date, there was one of these before. I have personally another one that is in my profile of projects. So I guess I'm not sure, but it's an option, and if they choose the 1521 or the 1520B or the 74711, it just depends on like what route allowed.
So I would say that this area in particular is known for small architects' offices, for artistic professional offices, and what's generally known as Class B office space in smaller buildings. And I am a little bit concerned about a lack of availability of that. I don't have any market information, but it is something I have been aware of that is starting to disappear, and what it means for this particular neighborhood and its attraction of creative professionals. I think 10 years ago, a nonprofit I know did a study, and this was the highest concentration of people in those fields. And where will they go, and will they still see New York as their center? And how do we keep that going is a concern of mine.
Ms. Delos.
Hi, Sarah, how are you? I've got 3 questions for you. So I think you said about 430 square feet was swapped from a mezzanine level to the roof. So that was between where exactly was that mezzanine?
All I know is all I was told was it was between the first and second floors.
Okay.
So I can find out exactly where it was located.
Okay, because that obviously is an interesting fact considering what we're being asked to do. And the other question I had, just, I see that they are or are planning to put in this new spiral staircase to the basement. Does that mean that cellar space is something that they're thinking would be leased as well?
They're definitely making use of it for residential storage.
I see.
I'm not positive if it's going to be leased out or just given like in connection with an apartment, but a portion of it will be converted for residential storage.
Okay. And then any information about the gap in time between when this was originally approved in 1996 and now? And
There was a previous owner at the time of the certification, and he just never built it out and sold the building in 2013, and it's just been vacant since then, so.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, the building's been vacant for how long?
Since 2013, for sure, when the applicant got it, purchased the building. He's not sure of how long it was vacant before then.
Well, the building had the right to build residential from the 3rd to the 5th floor
Correct,
since 1996.
correct.
But we don't know how long it was vacant
All
prior
I
to
know-
2013.
Yeah, I know that I was told that the owner does not know how long it was vacant, but it was vacant when he purchased it in 2013.
Any other questions about this? Okay, this will be referred out to Community Board for 45 days. This is Community Board 5.
There's no
Correct.
elevator.
Thank you.
No elevator on the bottom, is there?
Item number 5, page 228, proposed modification of existing restrictive declaration to facilitate the re-tenanting of an existing vacant industrial space at 9597 Horatio Street. Our presenter is Sylvia Lee, Manhattan office. We're on item number 5, page 228.
Good afternoon, Chairman Weisbrod, Commissioners. This is an application by 9597 Horatio LLC for a modification of restrictive declaration D93 to remove use restrictions and marketing requirements imposed on a 4,700 square foot ground floor space within an existing mixed-use building located at 95 Horatio Street within a C62A zoning district in the Gansevoort Market Historic District, Manhattan Community District 2. The project site is located in the Meatpacking District neighborhood of Manhattan. It is a single zoning lot bounded by West Street, Gansevoort Street, Washington Street, and Horatio Street. The site is also directly south of the new Whitney Museum of American Art and the southern terminus of the High Line. So this is the new museum. The space subject to this land use application is at the northwestern corner of the site. The lot is occupied by two buildings that were originally built for cold storage warehousing that was used primarily by meat, dairy, and poultry businesses. By 1985, the buildings were converted to residential use after the site was rezoned from M15 to C62A in 1984. Currently, the upper floors of the buildings contain over 200 residential units, while portions of the ground floor is occupied by a variety of retail uses and eating and drinking establishments. The buildings have existing retail frontages along Washington Street. New retail tenants are expected to move in the space along Gansevoort Street. The ground floor space subject to the RD is currently vacant. So it's here. The site is located within a C62A zoning district, which permits residential use as of right and a range of commercial uses, including commercial offices, retail, and eating and drinking establishments. Once a meatpacking center, over the years, the surrounding neighborhood has seen a substantial reduction in meat-related businesses and an increase in residential, retail, eating and drinking, arts and culture, office, hotel, and other commercial uses. Today, the meatpacking district, generally to the north and northeast of the site, is characterized by upscale retail shopping and dining, a vibrant nightlife, and a mix of residential and commercial buildings of varied scales. The area to the south is more residential with relatively limited commercial activities at street level. According to the applicant's research, the only active industrial uses in the vicinity is limited to the Gansevoort Meatpacking Co-op facility immediately north of the new Whitney Museum. It's located. A little bit background on the RD the applicant seeks to modify. D93, along with other 3 RDs shown on the sketch map, was entered into as part of a zoning map amendment which rezoned the area of approximately 2 blocks from M15 to C62A district. The rezoning was intended to facilitate new residential developments and residential conversions of non-residential buildings located in this area. At the time of the rezoning, the EIS disclosed certain adverse impacts on land use, neighborhood character, and socioeconomics, in particular the meat-related businesses that were still in this area. To mitigate such impacts, the City Planning Commission required Rockrose, the project sponsor at the time, to execute and record restrictive declarations against several of its properties within and outside of the rezone area, which is shown in this sketch map. These RDs generally include bulk regulations in the event of new construction or enlargement, and in the case of D93 and D94, restrict uses in certain defined industrial space, which were, at the time of the rezoning, still occupied by meat-related light industrial tenants. Since then, 2 modifications to D94, which is recorded along these properties to the east of the site, have been approved, once in 1998, the other in 2003. Those modifications expanded uses allowed on these properties to include use group 6 and use group 9 commercial uses. Going back to D93 recorded against the project site, among other restrictions relating to bulk, D93 obligates the property owner to use best efforts to maintain the use of a 4,700 square foot ground floor industrial space, shown in hatch here, for meat-related uses, and in the event of vacancy, to use best efforts to rent to such uses. If such tenants cannot be found, the space could be utilized for any permitted uses listed in the declaration, including light industrial uses listed in use groups 11, 16, 17, and 18. Until 2012, September 2012, Weiskel Beef, a meatpacking business, had been the tenant of the industrial space at the project site. In 2012, the business relocated 1 block north to the Gansevoort Meatpacking Cooperative, which is on the same block as the new Whitney Museum, located here. The space has since been renovated and combined eastwards within the building to form a larger space, which is currently vacant. some more photos looking south. These are some photos of the interior of the currently vacant industrial space. The proposed development site is the 8,105 square foot ground floor space, which includes the 4,700 square foot industrial space located in the northwestern corner of the building. Note that the area that is not hatched is not subject to any restrictions aside from the underlying C62A zoning regulations. The applicant proposes to re-tenant the space for restaurant, retail, and other uses permitted by the underlying C62A district. While a wide range of uses could be permitted as of right, it is anticipated that a restaurant use would occupy the space. To facilitate such proposed development, the applicant seeks the approval of a modification to the restrictive declaration D93 to remove the use restrictions in Article 2, Section 2.03 of the declaration. Pursuant to the terms of the RD, the proposed modification requires City Planning Commission and City Council approval. The applicant argues that given the changes in the area's land use, neighborhood character, and socioeconomic conditions since the 1984 rezoning, as well as changes within the meatpacking industry, the restrictive declaration's requirements to use and market the industrial space only for industrial and meat-related uses have become obsolete, and these mitigation measures are no longer necessary or appropriate. The applicant's statement is included in your briefing packages.
Thank you, Sylvia. Questions? Ms. Efron?
Make it really quick. Was this space USDA, is it refrigerated space? What was there left over from the meat world, and is it still intact in any way that makes it valuable to a food distribution company?
The current space? So it has, since the 1984 rezoning till September 2012, it was used by this beef related tenant. It was a small space, and they've been relocated to the meat cooperative, which is a larger space. I assume it caters to their needs better. And currently, the space has already been renovated and combined with this area to function as a retail or other commercial space. So with regards to the building's function, I think it might not serve as an essential facility for any meat-related businesses, but we can ask the applicant to respond to that.
Mr. Cantor?
You mentioned that the space has already been converted,
It's been renovated, yes.
renovated, and it's occupied,
No.
Not occupied.
it's ready for,
Yeah, it's
not a,
currently vacant. Yeah.
Ms. Levin?
Yes, Sylvia, I'm interested in knowing a little more about the circumstances in which Why Shall Beef moved to the market, was there an effort to renew their lease? Was it made impossible for them to renew their lease? Did they think moving to the market was a better place for them? Some context for the termination of their lease would be helpful. And I notice also that the restrictive declaration requires them, obviously the restrictive declaration was put in place really to protect this tenant, but it does say that subsequent use of the industrial space could only be for a permitted use, as you pointed out, and that the declarant shall use its best efforts to maintain industrial space presently occupied for meat-related use group 17A and 13B uses. So my question is, what best efforts the declarant did use to find a meat-related tenant for the space?
Right. With regards to the first question, I'll ask the applicant to provide more information by the time it comes back from the referral. As far as I know, the applicant did not market the space for meat-related uses. The distinction between this action with the good faith marketing special permit that the commission sees very frequently is that the applicant is not seeking relief after unfruitful marketing efforts. What they're arguing is that due to the socioeconomic changes and the changes within the meat packing industry, the requirement for marketing and the use restriction itself is no longer necessary. And this is what the commission is asked to consider.
Okay, so they're essentially saying, look, it's not even worth trying. It would be a different story if they came back to us and said, look, we tried,
Right,
and we can't find a tenant.
right.
Do you know, Sylvia, if is the cooperative filled? The cooperative, does it have a vacancy rate?
I can find out more about that, but I know that all the meatpacking businesses that are left in this area are located in the meatpacking co-op now. So according to a news article by The Real Deal, the beef company joined the rest of the meatpacking businesses in the co-op.
And literally, there are no beef companies that, in the meatpacking district, that are not located there?
Not that I'm aware of, and the applicants did their research in the areas, in the surrounding area, but we can look into that.
Ms. Deleuze?
So along those lines, since they're arguing that the changes in the industry basically don't require this to have the restrictive use that it's had, what third-party, unbiased research do we have about what the current status is for need for space in the meatpacking industry? Do we have any such source? The Real Deal is not exactly
Right, yeah.
real estate. So that would be helpful, I think.
Right, we can look into that. But as indicated in the previous CPC reports of the previous two modifications, the commission did recognize the changing land use and the circumstances of the meatpacking industry. But we can look into additional research on that.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, this will be also referred out to Community Board 2, and I look forward to their comments, which I'm sure will be.
It might be very meaty. So let's now move to item number 6, page 254, proposed renewal of a previously approved authorization concerning a group parking facility with commercial space at 470 New Dorp Lane. Our presenter is Barry Fisher, the Staten Island office, on item number 6, page 254.
Good afternoon, Commissioners, Chairman. The applicant requests a renewal of prior commission authorization in the New Dorp section of Staten Island's Community District 2. The prior authorization was for a group parking facility which is accessory to a commercial development in a zoning lot of in excess of 4 acres in a C41 district, which included a parking reduction of up to 50%. The project site is located at the southwest corner of New Dorp Lane and Mill Road, which is 1 block east of Highland Boulevard, which is the major thoroughfare along the Staten Island South Shore in a C41 district. The site is surrounded by a 72-unit development of townhouses, commercial development fronting Highland Boulevard to the west, and detached homes in an R31 district to the east, and a public high school to the north across from New Dorp Lane. In 2011, the Commission granted approval, which included a 44% reduction of parking in order to facilitate the construction of a new 100,000 square foot retail store and accessory parking for 374 cars accessed by 4 curb cuts. The proposed development was not constructed, and accordingly, 4 years after approval, the authorization would have lapsed without having filed a renewal application prior to last November. The application seeks the renewal of the original authorization in order to facilitate the development of the project as originally proposed. The commission may renew the application, provided that the facts upon which the authorization was granted have not substantially changed, and the zoning district and character in the surrounding area remain unchanged. The application was referred to Community Board 2 for a recommendation, and they opted to not hold a hearing or vote and issued a letter of no objection.
Thank you. Any questions? I will ask for show of hands to send a letter to DOB assenting to an approval and extension of the permit. See, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, Barry.
Let's now move to item number 7, page 268. It's the first pre-hearing item, Queens pre-hearing with respect to the proposed Greater JFK Business Improvement District. And our presenter is Barry Dinnerstein, Deputy Director of Housing, Economic Infrastructure Planning for the Department. We're on item number 7, page 268.
Good afternoon. This is a little bit different type of bid than one we've seen before, in that it is a industrial bid. It works in an industrial area. And we do have a couple of industrial bids that are operating around the city, 3 others. Those bids, however, have very, very modest budgets, and this is the first industrial bid where it's still going to have a modest budget, but they're going to have $500,000 worth of it, which is substantially more than industrial bids that exist already in the city. And this is an area, that does not get a lot of focus, but it's actually pretty significant area, industrial area, and a lot of jobs here. The bid is about 191 acres. It's located in the Springfield Gardens neighborhood of Southeast Queens. To the north is the Springfield Gardens residential neighborhood. To the west is the Ozone Park neighborhood of Queens. To the east is Idlewild Park, which is an undeveloped parkland. And beyond that is the 5 towns of Nassau County. Thank you. And then to the south is JFK Airport. The proposed bid is predominantly zoned M11. There's a small portion of it along Rockaway Boulevard that's zoned C22 with a variety of R3 districts. And the surrounding neighborhoods surrounding the area are zoned R3, which is a lower density small home district. The proposed bid has about 600 firms, about 4.1 million square feet of commercial and industrial space. There are about 8,000 private sector jobs, and then there are many additional jobs in public sector, including a sanitation garage, an MTA bus facility. The FAA has headquarters here. There's also a school bus company here. There are 9 hotels in the proposed district. There are 154 small homes, and we'll talk a little bit about the homes in a minute. There are 3 homeless facilities, and there's also a federal detention facility here. Most of the buildings in the district are post-61 and were built pursuant to the underlying M11 zoning. What makes this area interesting and something that I think few people really understand is that this area is a center for the custom broker and freight forward industry. These companies manage what is essentially this complex arrangements that you need to do to bring goods into and out of the United States. And many, many goods are brought into the United States by air, and JFK is a major destination for these goods. The people who work and run businesses in this area decide how to best bring goods into the U.S. or bring goods out of the U.S. They try and figure out for their customers what's the cheapest, quickest way to get something into the US, which may include bringing it by plane, may include bringing it by ship, may include bringing it into Kennedy, may include bringing it to other airports around the country, depending on wherever they think is in the best interest of their customers. Some of these companies and their warehouses are on airport, some of them are off airport. This bid is strictly about the off-airport businesses. There's a sort of integration between the folks who work on airport and off airport. And there's sort of a synergy that's sort of operating in the district. Now, JFK has lost market share in terms of the air freight industry over time. At one point, it was a leading air freight location in the United States. Now, depending on how you do the calculation, it's ranked about 7th nationally. In response to this, EDC and the Port Authority have done a joint study looking at the air freight industry called the JFK Air Cargo Study. And it has a series of different proposals about how to enhance the existing air freight industry at JFK. Freight has moved out of JFK because of high cost, traffic congestion, obsolete ground facilities, which have caused shippers and airlines to move some of their business outside of New York City. That being said, JFK still has the most international flights of any U.S. airport. It's particularly well positioned for the European market. And the New York metropolitan area is also the largest domestic market and a very affluent market, which makes it a fairly important place to be and an important place to bring goods. So the city and the Port Authority are working on this new master plan for bringing air cargo onto the airport. And this would include replacing obsolete on-airport facilities with new facilities, new space for office, new office space for brokers, new truck and vehicle parking facilities, a whole long-term plan to sort of bring space on airport up to current industry standards. With the building of these new facilities, there could be some repositioning of some of the older off-airport facilities. There's a concern that many of the companies are starting to move to Nassau County because of a lack of amenities in the area. And the bid hopes to work with the city to reposition and improve the area, one of the reasons for setting up the bid. Some of the issues about why there are problems in the area has to do with, this is predominantly a shipping area, and you have a situation of aging loading bays and narrow streets. The standard industry truck is now 53 feet. The zoning only requires a loading berth of 50 feet. With a cab in front, you can sometimes have trucks that are as long as 70 feet. And it creates issues like this where trucks have trouble getting into loading berths, it blocks traffic. It makes it sort of a difficult place to do business. There is a lot of complaint on the part of businesses about a lack of adequate parking. This picture doesn't quite show the problem. We did this actually on Good Friday, so it wasn't quite as busy as it might be during the week, although there was a considerable amount of activity for the afternoon of Good Friday, and this, because obviously planes are moving in and out of the U.S. all the time, and so things are being shipped all the time. There's almost no public transportation. There are a couple of buses that run through the area, but by and large, public transportation is limited. There's an example of how they deal with parking, with long curb cuts, and cars driving on sidewalks, not the best situation. In the middle of the district are 4 residential blocks in the Spring Jam Neighborhood Association. It's about 153 homes, solid residential blocks, all zoned at this point M11. And the residents complain about industrial conflicts, particularly with truck traffic. The residents were at first very skeptical about the bid, but have been brought into the bid. They're going to be part of the board, and are actually quite excited about being part of the bid and working with businesses to sort of deal with common problems. This is the regional headquarters for the FAA. It's a sort of regional office, suburban office building. It's actually privately owned, so it will pay an assessment to the bid. It's an example of a sort of a suburban office building that's sitting in the middle of the district with a lot of jobs and providing a lot of services to the air cargo community. And also within the bid, while I showed you pictures of older facilities that don't quite work, there also are a number of campus-like facilities which are designed in such a way so as to allow for parking, truck movements. In the very back of the building, you can see there is sort of an office building for sort of custom brokers, so it all sort of works as sort of an internal campus. The bid is proposing a budget of about $500,000, of which about $130,000 would be spent for marketing and labor force development, $100,000 for public safety and security, $50,000 for sanitation and snow removal. And snow removal is a big issue here, not as bad this winter as it was in the previous winter. And this is true of many industrial areas. Because the streets are sort of considered secondary streets, sanitation does come in, they do get them open, but they don't clean them to the extent that it's possible really to move your trucks around. And if you can't move your trucks around, you're out of business. And so one of the things that actually a lot of the property owners are very excited about is that in situations where there's a lot of snow and sanitation hasn't quite gotten the streets up to the satisfaction of the business owners, the bid will pay for cleaning the streets. Also money for technical and planning services at $70,000. That's going to be used to start to think about how this district should go forward in the coming years. And then $150,000 for administration and advocacy. The bid would have a formula based on assessed value and building square footage. Undeveloped land pays about 95% of the rate. Mixed buildings pay at 50%, residential pays $1, government and nonprofit are exempt. The largest taxpayer would pay about $44,600. It works out to about 11 cents a square foot for the 100% payers. 6 property owners control 41% of the land, and about half of the AV in the district. And once those people were on board, it was pretty good sailing for moving forward with the bid. The bid has solicited support, and there's a book that was left for the commissioners to look at. They received responses from about 45% of the property owners and 58% of AV. 94% of those people who responded were in favor, 6% were opposed. Community Board 13 voted 35-0 to support the bid. Community Board 12 voted to support the bid as well. They were only a small part of the bid. They did vote in favor, although we have not received the recommendation.
Thank you, Barry. Questions?
I just had a
Mr.
question.
Knuckles?
Barry, the page on use conflicts and where you described 4 blocks of residential surrounded by industrial uses. Yeah, no. You skipped it.
I'm going to show.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So this is the Spring Jam neighborhood.
Right. And that's an R3 too?
No, it's M1.
It's M11, that's what I thought you said.
Yes.
So, that negatively impacts that, that neighborhood in terms of.
Well, for the residents, yes, it's potentially a problem.
So
It's noisy.
I mean, I don't know that
my
the
question
residents are
is-
complaining about their zoning, but they are complaining about trucks going down their street.
Right, I can imagine. But is the department looking at that zoning for the future?
Well, it is
I
what it
don't,
is.
I'll ask a point about, I don't think we are looking at that particularly, but whether we're looking at rezoning the M1 neighborhood with us, four blocks of residential.
At the current moment, no.
Ms. Efron.
Will they be prepared to speak, or the bid organizers be prepared to speak about workforce training options with East New York and other neighborhoods with high unemployment that are
Yeah,
somewhat
one
nearby?
of the budget lines in the bid is actually to work to do sort of employment referrals, and apparently there are issues with finding people, and they have put money together for that, and yes, the bid will talk more about how they see this all working.
And one other question, is there an LDC now?
Greater Jamaica, at one point was, this is an IBZ, and Greater Jamaica was the IBZ provider. Aside from that, no. But the bid will operate.
Is the association that had its logo on the bottom sort of acting as the LDC?
The association.
There was an association of customs, it was on your presentation, but not on
Oh, yeah.
ours.
It's like
No? Okay.
airport, JFK Airport.
There's an association of airport, sort of freight forwarders, which is not really sort of an LDC. The bid, and part of the reason that the bid is being ordered is to sort of actually get the area organized. This was done in conjunction with EDC. EDC helped fund the organizing effort.
Just so I can clarify, so these houses are all pre-61, presumably?
Yes.
Right?
Yes, been there a very long time.
Ms.
And-
Ortiz.
And actually, we're hoping that the residents will, actually someone from the resident association will be here on Wednesday, so that you can actually ask them about what their concerns are.
Hi. This is a really interesting project, because obviously it's an important industry cluster. I mean, not just for this area, but for the city as a whole. JFK is an amazing asset. And so I'm curious, you know, to the extent you mentioned that JFK and the Port Authority had been conducting some studies to sort of understand what's happening and why they've been seeing a decrease in freight, and that the amenities in this area played a role in that. So is JFK, where do they stand? Do they anticipate playing a role and you know, sitting on the board? I know that, you know, the board can be comprised of those with an interest in this. Has there been any discussions of whether JFK and/or the Port Authority will be represented on the board?
That I don't know. The bid sponsors will be here, and they can talk about, I mean, I think there's been a pretty good ongoing relationship with the Port Authority in establishing the bid, but I don't know whether they're gonna have a formal role or not.
Okay, I mean, I would hope so, because that would make a lot of sense. You know, the other thing is, from what you showed, even sort of the images, there seems to be a real need for infrastructure improvements, and I imagine that the advocacy here is partly to accomplish that. So in the district plan, there's a mention of the maximum cost of improvements during the existence of the bid will not exceed $5 million. I can see running through $5 million very quickly. So I'm not sure why that's in the district plan, or if that's limited to the funding that would come from, you know, any.
Yeah, I think, you know, some of that is somewhat boilerplate in terms of how much money they're willing to allocate for public improvements. At this point, I think they are hoping that substantial public improvements, whether it's drainage or street reconstruction, be undertaken by the city. And part of the reason for advocacy is they want to go out and lobby and try and get the city, get their elected officials to support, you know, city improvements to make the area work as a business area.
I would imagine so, which is why I was just surprised that there is a limit that is really
I
quite
think-
low, so that
I think that is
they might-
boilerplate, and obviously you have to sell cost to everybody, and you don't want to stick numbers in there where people get terrified as to how much the taxes might go up as a result.
But we don't want to restrict them in any way from being able to advocate for the improvements that
Well, they
they
can
want.
advocate for improvements, they're just not going to pay for them.
Okay, so that was the clarification, that this is limited only to the cost of improvements that would be paid for by the bid.
Correct.
Okay, so that
Right.
maybe there should be
Nothing to do
something.
with the city spending.
Okay, so that just, there's nothing here to suggest that specifically, and maybe it could be beefed up a little.
Okay.
Thank you.
Actually, I'd like to follow up on question that Ms. Ortiz asked. Does the Port Authority own any land within the boundaries of the bid?
It's a little bit more complicated question than, there's a piece of property here, which is, was part of the Kennedy Airport, part of the area the city ceded to the Port Authority for Kennedy Airport, but was never developed, and so it was given back to the city, and EDC has been developing, is trying to do an industrial development on that site. So I don't know if that's, I don't believe there's any property that is outright under the jurisdiction of the Port Authority in the bid.
And do the proposed boundaries literally abut the airport and the Port Authority's
In some
lease?
cases, yes, I believe so.
So just to Ms. Ortiz's question, is the Port Authority a contributor to the bid?
Financially, no. I mean, the Port Authority was involved in formation and obviously has been supportive, but I don't believe there's any financial contribution.
I mean, this is obviously a bid that, if it is successful in improving the neighborhood or the property within the boundaries of the bid, would presumably also have a significant impact on, positive impact on the airport's operation, and particularly the freight operation at the airport, to the advantage of the Port Authority and presumably all of us.
Yeah. I mean, almost everything that's going on here is related in some way to the airport. Whether it's freight, there are hotels, there are actually some people who make, it's like meals, put together meals that they'll put on planes. I mean, there's a whole slew of sort of airport-related function that goes on in this neighborhood.
Was the Port Authority, along with EDC, have they been active in helping to create the bid?
I believe the Port Authority was present in all the sort of meetings, and like, I don't know that the Port Authority actually put money into this. EDC put money into actually establishing the district, helping to pay for the organizing efforts.
Because the Port Authority is, as you know, a active participant in a few bids in the city, and I believe at least one not in the city, Newark.
Okay. They'll, the bid sponsors will be here, and they can give you more information about where the port has been on Wednesday.
Mr. Cantor, then Ms. Deluz.
Did you mention something about the bid having a 5-year expectancy?
No. It says within 5 years, the bid will spend no more than $5 million on capital improvements in a 5-year period. So that's in their first 5 years, they're proposing to spend no more than $5 million for capital improvements, though no capital improvements initially are anticipated. It is possible to change that if there were to be a need or a demand, and property owners agree to pay for it. But at this point, this is what the proposal is.
And during these 5 years, presumably there will be lobbying as well as bid oriented.
Yes, for improvements.
In effect, we're authorizing components of that bid to go out and lobby.
Well, I think we're authorizing a group to go out and come up with sort of problems and work with the city to like spell out some of the problems, make it clear. It's not an area that's gotten a lot of attention. And to sort of say, one of the issues here is the street system is, what's actually on the ground is very different than what's mapped. You have issues where you have like the Nassau Expressway, which is mapped but not built. You have Rockaway Boulevard, which is built, but it's supposed to be in another place. I mean, there's all these sort of technical issues that, present problems at times. And one of the things that the bid wants to do is focus, get the city to focus on the area.
not questioning or challenging the response you just gave me. The only thing that seems to me that we're being asked to extend the limits of our expectation of bids, or the limits of our understanding of where bids go. And I'm wondering whether that could be an issue in the future.
Well, ask Mr. Cirillo. The bids have vast potential. They could go anywhere and do anything.
I'm not sure I understood the question, though, but I think there's a difference. I mean, certainly in the bid world, as you two know, advocacy is a critical element of what bids are created to do. So the term lobbying, it has a very different definition than advocacy in the sense of being a community-based organization that would work with elected officials and the administration at all different levels to improve the quality of life. So we definitely like to separate the word lobbying from advocacy, and I think that's part of what originally you raised. I'm not sure about the difference in this. I mean, it definitely has a different form. As an industrial bid, it's a unique and in many ways a very limited scope. Its function is quite challenging, no doubt, but a little different that way. But the general principles and approval process seem similar. So I don't know if you see something here that I'm missing about the sort of precedent-setting nature of this one. So if no.
You don't see it, I don't see it.
Okay, good.
Indeed. And I would just add, I mean, this is the essence of what a bid does, which is advocate for the improvement of its neighborhood.
And I would just add the bigger picture issue, which I guess time will tell, about the contributions perhaps from otherwise exempt properties. As someone who represents quite an iconic building that we share the name with, that also does not contribute to the bid. There are always, particularly at the beginning, not necessarily 28 years later, but at the beginning, opportunities to figure out how, in other forms perhaps, or in other ways, payments in lieu of assessments could be made. So it's something for the group as it continues to form itself to think about doing, because once the opportunity is lost, you're hard pressed to turn the clock back on that.
And this one is really, the whole focus of it is really
Correct.
to
The operation.
enhance the operation of a really critical economic development engine of the city. Ms. Delus.
This is a great conversation. My question is very narrow. And that just has to do with the federal detention facility. I'm assuming that use is connected to the airport when folks somehow come in or out without proper documentation?
Yeah, I believe, first of all, it is a private facility. It's
Okay.
it's not a publicly owned
Okay.
facility. It is apparently, if you come into the United States and you are not admitted, and they choose to deport you, it is where they will keep you until they figure out what they're going to do, how they're going to send you back.
It's a private facility. Okay, it's helpful to know.
Ms. Ortiz.
I would like to sort of second the comment from Commissioner Cirillo that the opportunity here is really to engage the Port Authority, and I would imagine that this is a great return on investment for them, and there should be some sort of contribution made. But just for clarification, so the district plan, this is back to your question, Commissioner Cantor, mentions that during the existence of the bid, that the maximum cost of improvements, if any, will not exceed $5 million. So there's no 5-year term, it's during the existence of the bid, at least according to this plan, and as I understand it, it's got to be tweaked, it's still boilerplate language, so.
Thank you, ma'am.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll have a interesting hearing on Wednesday.
Thanks, Barry. Let's now move to item number 8, page 272, proposed zoning map and zoning text amendments, urban development action area designation, approval and disposition of COP, in addition to special permits to facilitate a mixed-use predominantly residential development. And our presenter is Hae-Kyung Yang of the Queen's Office. We're on item number 8, page 272.
So this is a pre-hearing item. HPD is seeking approval of a zoning map amendment to change a portion of a block from a C42 district to a C45X district. A text amendment to include the rezoning proposal as a MIH designated area, a UDAP designation, project approval and disposition of city-owned property, and 2 special permits to facilitate the development of 100% affordable, mixed-use, and senior housing project in Flushing, Queens. The development site is currently owned by the city and is a municipal lot consisting of 156 metered parking spaces. Surrounding the project area is a concentration of commercial, office, hotel, and retail buildings with multifamily medium-density apartment buildings. The site is currently zoned C42, and surrounded districts include C43, R6, R71, and M1-1. The proposed rezoning from C42 to C45X, an R7X equivalent, would be an extension of the neighboring residential density of R71 to the east and maintains a similar commercial density as of its current C42. The bulk permitted by a C45X would be considered appropriate in the context of downtown Flushing, as many of the buildings surrounding the project area are 2 to 16 stories, mixed-use residential and commercial buildings. The proposed text amendment would designate the rezoning for mandatory inclusionary housing. Additionally, the applicant requests UDAP designation for the development sites. Lastly, 2 special permits are requested for this proposal. One for the public parking facility that will replace 156 municipal parking spaces, which was part of the RFP, and additional 73 spaces. And 2 for the special permit that would allow for the transfer of approximately 10,000 square feet of development rights from Lot 65, which is a railroad right-of-way, to from Lot 64, which is a railroad right-of-way, to Lot 65, or the other way around, sorry. The additional 10,000 square feet would allow for 9 additional affordable housing units. HPD is also seeking a zoning override for a waiver for required accessory off-street loading berth. These actions are requested to facilitate a 10-story mixed-use, mixed-income affordable housing development. Approximately 14,000 square feet of community facility space is located both on the ground and second floors. The ground floor community facility will be designated for community meeting and exhibition space. The second floor community facility space is programmed to offer a range of care services for senior residents managed by AfriCare and HANAC. These services would include adult daycare services such as education, exercise opportunities, case management, as well as more comprehensive care services for higher need residents, including health screening, medical referrals, and special care. Approximately 25,000 square feet of commercial retail space would also be located on the ground floor. Each retail space varying in size from 500 square feet to 3,000 square feet, geared towards local retailers. From the second floor to the 9th floor, the project would provide approximately 231 affordable units plus 1 superintendent's unit. Of this total, 66 units would be for seniors and 165 units for families with a mix of studios, 1, 2, and 3 bedroom apartments that would range in size from 450 square feet for studios and up to 1,200 square feet for 3 bedrooms. Approximately 12,000 square feet of open space are planned on the second floor and on the roof. The second floor open space terrace would have a Zen garden area on the west side dedicated to community facility space, and on the east side, a kids' play area and outdoor community space for residents. The roof would include a Grow NYC garden and seating for residents of the building. Lastly, as mentioned earlier, an attended 229 parking facility will be located underground. This project was certified January 4th and referred out to the community board and borough president. The community board voted to disapprove the project, 37 opposed, 2 in favor, and 1 abstaining. They have indicated their satisfaction with the project team and the development itself, but disapproved the project ultimately, as indicated as number 3 in their recommendation response, because of their opposition to an agreement made prior to the inception of this project. As part of the Willets Points of Agreement made in 2013, 25% of the affordable units would be allocated for CB7, and the other 25% for CB3 and 4, whereas standard HPD policy would have allocated 50% of the units to CB7 residents. They believe that because this project is solely in CB7, CB3 and CB4 should not have preferential treatment in this application. They're also opposed to the mirror override to eliminate a loading berth, although they did agree that it was not needed because of the traffic and preferred commercial street parking spaces. They also opposed the project being designated an MIH area. The borough president voted. The draft of the recommendation is currently waiting to be signed, but from indication of the borough president's staff, the borough president would likely vote to approve the project with conditions.
Will we get that, do you think, by the hearing on Wednesday?
Absolutely, that is when it's due.
Questions? Mr. Cantor, and then Ms. Dellis.
Information with respect to that, we may be very well getting it today.
Yes. Supposedly by the end of the day today.
There's still a lingering problem over here with the idea of sharing when it's not, sharing between community districts where it's not been shared before. And I don't think this administration was involved in that aspect of it, I'm not sure. But once again, with the comments or concerns about what happens next time, there shouldn't be that, because you'd just be sitting community board against community board.
Correct. And I believe from my understanding from the draft of the recommendation, the borough president will have, in her conditions, I believe that she says exactly what you said as part of the conditions.
Ms. Delus, and then Mr. Cirillo?
So I'm just, to kind of unpack this a bit more, and I note that in your write-up that you list the AMI for downtown Flushing as being approximately $35,000, and the AMI levels Community Board 7 to being approximately $57,000. I guess that's for family of 3 or 4?
Family of 3.
Family of 3. And the AMI targets for the affordability, for the new affordable units?
So it ranges from 22,000 to 86,000.
And probably, I probably missed it, but what the breakdown is by AMI band, because I think that's going to help address potentially some of the concerns that the community boards have.
Yes. So the breakdown that I am aware of is 37% AMI, 47% AMI, targeted really for the senior units, and then 57%, 80%, and 100% AMI for the families.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions about this? If not, do we have a sense of, will the community board be testifying on Wednesday? No. Okay. Thanks, Akin. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Levin.
Well, so then I guess I'm curious to understand as much as possible about the Willis Point MOU. I don't know if it's appropriate to get a copy of it. Obviously, it sounds like the Queensborough president will be addressing that MOU. What's his status as a commitment? We understand these are political deals made. How long do they endure in time? Are we going against the MOU? What's its status going forward? Et cetera. So some background on the MOU, I guess, would be helpful, unless it's provided in the Queensborough President's letter.
We'll see if, I assume we have it somewhere, right? I don't know, and some of you who may have been here at the time Willett's Point went through the land use review process, maybe we'll be able to recall whether that MOU was essentially, at least on this point, agreed upon at the time this came to the planning commission?
No, it would have been at the council.
It was at the council?
Yeah.
Okay. See if we can get our hands on it.
That's one of the concerns, complaints of the community group, that they were left out of the process.
I see.
Okay, I don't know, we'll try to find it. Yeah, I'm sorry, Ms. Delos.
Since it appears as though the community board may not be here on Wednesday, which is unfortunate, and it would be great if someone could come. What I wanted to raise is, I'm wondering, either at the community board hearing or at the borough president hearing, the issue that's currently facing HPD right now related to community preference, whether or not that was disclosed and discussed with the community board?
Absolutely.
And whether or not they fully appreciated the constraints that the city is under as it relates to community preference right now?
And HPD will speak on Wednesday, but they have addressed it at multiple meetings with CB7 and the borough president. And they've said that HPD would be using their standard marketing practices at the time of the project, is ready for lottery. The community preference policy is currently under litigation, so it's possible that the current policy would change, and that's what they've shared with the community and the borough president. But they can speak more to it on Wednesday.
I'm sorry, quick question.
Yeah.
When you say the current policy, are you referring to the 50% for the local community board?
Yes.
As opposed to the split amongst the 3 community boards?
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
And I would, I guess, just note for the record that, as we all know, that the same, if I'm not mistaken, even though this went through the land use review process in the previous administration, the same council members that approved this then are still there now. Mr. Marin.
I just have a question, because you just kind of got my mind thinking. You say that the current policy is under litigation?
Yes.
Is that for all of HPD projects or just this project in particular?
No, it's a citywide litigation, fair housing litigation.
Yes.
It's not just the city.
Okay, I'm sorry, Ms. Levin.
Yes, and I guess I do have a question. I understand the community board doesn't feel that an MIH mapping is necessary here, presumably because of the affordability levels planned in this project. But the advantage of MIH would be that it is there forever and for what happens going forward. But I guess I would like to, I guess I could do it myself, but, match up how the proposed affordability levels in the current project fit into MIH.
I think they were not actually opposed to the levels at all. They were, I think they were fine with it. I think they were just opposed to MIH as a policy.
Oh, I see. So this is kind of a hangover issue from?
That is my understanding.
Okay. But is this an option?
They would, HPD would propose an option 2.
An option 2? Okay. And that's what, so this development scenario complies with option 2?
Correct.
30% at 80%.
30% at 80, yes. Okay, any other questions for Head County? Get out of here while the getting out's going to take.
Okay, let's
We'll see you
Mr. Beck on
Wednesday.
Item number 9, Brooklyn pre-hearing, proposed zoning text amendment to create a new special permit for an enhanced business area and special permits pursuant to the new text to facilitate a mixed-use development at 1925 Kent Avenue. We're on item number 9, page 333, Brooklyn pre-hearing. And Vanessa Esplanade-Bonelli is presenting this today.
Thank you. Good afternoon. So the applicants, the New York City Department of City Planning and 19 Kent Development and Heritage Equities, are seeking a zoning text amendment to create a new zoning resolution, Section 7496, to allow modifications to use, bulk, parking, and loading requirements for properties within an enhanced business area. The private applicant, Heritage Equity Partners, is requesting 2 City Planning Commission special permits to allow a floor area increase for the provision of incentive uses and public plaza modifications, and to allow the reductions of off-street parking loading berth requirements in order to facilitate a new development of approximately 380,000 square foot mixed-use office, retail, and industrial development located in Williamsburg's North Side, Community District 1. So first, we're gonna present the proposed text amendment, and then we're gonna present the application for 25 Kent. The proposed text would apply to a 14-city block N12 district located in Williamsburg, in Greenpoint, Williamsburg's Northside IBC, Community District 1. The N12 district is roughly bounded by Kent Avenue in the west, Wythe Avenue in the east, and between North 9th and North 15th Streets. The G and the L train are about 5 to 7 blocks to the east and the south, and the East River Ferry is about 5 to 7 blocks to the southwest. The N12 district consists of some light industrial uses. However, recently we've seen a growing number of commercial conversions in the area, mostly for restaurants, bars, and entertainment venues such as nightclubs, music venues, bowling alleys, and some upper floor office conversions as well. All new construction in the area is generally to accommodate new hotels, as we can see here. The Greenpoint Williamsburg IBC is composed of an M11, an M13 to the north, and an M12 district, which is the same area as the proposed text change. This is approximately 55% of the IBZ. So this zoning district currently allows 2 FAR for most commercial and industrial uses and up to 4.8 for community facility uses, such as medical offices. It has a maximum street wall height of 60 feet and before requiring to set back via a sky exposure plane. So currently, this is what allows the tower-like developments that we're seeing in the area. So industrial and manufacturing uses in the area tend to have low FARs and low building heights. The average built FAR is around 1.2, and each tax lot contains about 0.78 FAR of industrial uses. However, when we have both industrial and office or retail component, these are 0.85 FAR on average. The total employment in the Greenpoint Williamsburg IBZ has seen a 65% increase from 2010 to 2014. So now the total employment is about 2,400 jobs. The industrial sector employment has seen an increase of 36% and the non-industrial of 103%. Now zooming into the industrial employment, we can see that the subsectors that have grown are film, transportation, construction, repair, maintenance, and transport and warehousing. And we've seen a decrease in wholesale trade and manufacturing. However, these still make up approximately 480 of the jobs in the IBC. So it's still a significant number. The proposed enhanced business area contains approximately 21.5 acres and is dominated by commercial and industrial uses, with a significant growing of entertainment and hotel component. These are approximately 41 zoning lots and 36 individual property owners in the area. So we're gonna go through this map in sections. So the northern area of the map, here we can see some of the industrial owner occupants, which include, I don't know if I can point, but which include the metal stamping, here we can see, and also the plastic manufacturing, which is 1 block to the north. We could see TMI Plastics. So non-owner occupants include a few small-scale construction, contracting, and fabrication businesses, and a produce wholesaler, an additional that has additional facilities in East New York. Now to the center of the site, we have the proposed development site, so where 25 Kent would be, as well as 2 hotels, and also event and business venues. So the Brooklyn Brewery, where we can see here, that also has a large event space, and the hotel and nightclub across the street, but we also have Amazon photo studio. To the south of the development, the south of the enhanced business area, we have 2 other event spaces here as well. And we have the larger industrial owner-operated business, so the co-rec type, which is an in-cartridge manufacturer that has numerous locations around the country and Mexico, and has slowly been consolidating and selling off properties in the area since the 1990s. There's also a small furniture fabricator in the area and other small event spaces. So today, 35% of uses in the area are industrial and manufacturing. This totals 330,000 square feet of lot area. In terms of built square feet, they include approximately 438,000 square feet across approximately 19 buildings. And 86% of these are owner-operated. So as discussed earlier, there is a co-application by Heritage Equities and Department of City Planning for a tax amendment allowing changes to the used bulk parking loading requirements for properties within the M12. This tax is being proposed to facilitate the 25 Kent development, an innovative proposal bringing Brooklyn's first speculative commercial and industrial space online since the 1970s. This new tax has 4 major components. Applicants can request the increase of their maximum allowable floor area for a limited number of commercial and industrial uses. This bonus floor area would be defined as an incentive use. This floor area increase is conditioned on the creation of industrial-only space tied to the development in perpetuity. This floor area would be defined as a business-enhancing use. When applying for this increase, the underlying zoning district envelope would no longer apply, and a series of contextual lifestyle regulations would be required. And finally, a second special permit would allow the CPC to reduce or waive accessory off-street parking and loading berth requirements. So let's take a look at how the bonus floor area works. Incentive uses are controlled by the underlying zoning district, in this case the M12. The new floor area generated can be for any as-of-right uses except for those explicitly identified within the text. Some of these uses are the hotel, self-storage facilities, retail, entertainment venues, and warehousing. The intent of this requirement is to encourage both the growth of jobs that are consistent and beneficial for the neighborhood, as well as increasing the neighborhood's job densities. In order to achieve the increase in floor area, the proposal must include a specific subset of industrial uses called business-enhancing uses, which would help create and retain industrial spaces in the Greenpoint-Williamsburg IBC. This text proposes a table outlining the bonus ratio and adjusted maximum FAR. This M12 district's base FAR is currently 2, but the new special permit would allow an increase of total FAR up to 4.8 for the provision of 0.8 FAR of the business-enhancing uses. So basically, for the provision of 1 square foot of business-enhancing uses, an applicant would be allowed to increase their incentive use by 2.5 feet. As a condition of applying for the floor area special permit, the underlying building envelope would no longer apply. Instead of the sky exposure plane, a series of contextual requirements would come into effect. The proposed text requires the building to be pushed to the street line, then setting up base heights and maximum heights, helping creating a stronger street wall, and the base heights would be from 40 to 75 feet, then setting back 10 to 15 feet, and rising to a maximum building height of 110. However, recognizing the unique nature of mixed commercial and industrial buildings, dormer up to 50% of the street wall would be allowed. To achieve safer feeling and more active streets, the building is required to introduce transparency and glazing on the ground floor, as well as lighting, artwork to help break up long and flat street walls. Additionally, the underlying M District sign regulations related related to height and size would be superseded by C6-4 district regulations, which are slightly more stringent. Finally, recognizing that public plazas can help provide sort of a relief from these developments, they can also help introduce a meeting place for the workers and the visitors. These would be allowed. But because of the tight conceptual envelopes, when a plaza is provided, the building can rise up 25 feet, additional 25 feet. However, no additional bonus floor area is provided for that. It's basically that the bulk that would be in the plaza would go located on the top of the building. So to prevent small plazas and continuous breaks in street wall and the dilutions of plazas across the neighborhood, there are minimum plaza size thresholds that are proposed. So while most of the zoning resolutions 3770 public plaza requirements would apply, the text proposes the CPC may allow the modification of these requirements within the same floor area special permit. Recognizing that these plazas within the mixed industrial areas may result in unique conditions, site designs, and programmatic constraints, and the proposed review of plaza modification permits some design flexibility. The new text also proposes to allow the reduction or waiver of underlying parking and loading requirements. Specifically within the M12, high parking requirements can result costly and inefficient use of land. Combining these requirements with maximum street wall heights, it may be difficult for a site to actually utilize all the available floor area in a cost-effective manner. The proposal special permit for the modification of accessory off-street parking and loading berth requirements would reside in section 74-963. In association with the floor area special permit, an applicant would have to meet additional discretionary findings related to traffic congestion and the movement of people and goods on site and adjacent streets, the length and quality of curb cuts, and would allow the CPC to apply additional safeguards if needed. In terms of the industrial space requirements, there would be use group restrictions to 11A, 16A, 16B, 17B, 17C, and 18A. They would have to provide a site plan and a floor plan to review these detailed plans, and also a notice of restriction would be tied to the property and would be public information. In terms of, there's also operational requirements, so a minimum sizing and minimum contiguous space for these industrial spaces, as well as where the location and access of the freight elevator and loading berths. Also, the layout would have to provide ceiling heights and loads and environmental review of these mix of uses. So now we'll explain the proposed development that would be facilitated by these two CPC special permits. The private applicant, Heritage Equity, is requesting the approval of two new special permits for floor area increase and plaza modifications pursuant to 74-962, and for the reduction in off-street parking and loading requirements. The proposed development site is located in the center of the M12, as we can see here. The site is outlined in red. It's a full city block, approximately 80,000 square feet, and is currently vacant. It was being utilized by a construction equipment storage and rental yard, but they moved into a custom facility in Maspeth. If approved, the applicants are proposing to develop a new 8-story, approximately 380,000 mixed office, retail, and industrial development. The building would rise to a maximum height of 135 feet after stepping back from the northern and the southern facades in a cigarette-like fashion. This development is anchored by two public plazas in the east and the west ends of the block. So an interior lobby space would connect both plazas through the center of the site, allowing small-scale retail to locate here. Also, it would grant people access to the both elevator and freight elevator in the first floor. The applicants are proposing multiple ground floor users that would be 3,000 to 7,000 square feet in space increments. 2 elevator banks would be located off the arcade, so here, and a freight elevator and loading berths would be located here. The applicants are proposing a 275-space parking garage and 39-space bicycle storage space in the cellar of the building. We can see in the section here. And the floor-to-floor ceiling heights would be 16 feet. So in order to accommodate light industrial users and commercial. So the east and west facade would all be completely glazed, and what we can see here is the basically lobby space that would connect and would be accessible by the public. Here we can see an elevation along White Avenue, and we can see that is sort of in the same sort of level as what the White Hotel adjacent to the development. The section through the proposed northern wing indicates that that linear floor plates are created, and the applicant has stated that this allows for future tenant flexibility and also facilitates their expansion within the building as they grow. Along North 13th Street, the applicants are proposing the building's parking ramp, so here and here, and they are also locating the loading entrances of this street. The staggered upper floors allow for each story to have an outdoor space, and the public plaza would be nestled partially into the wing on either side of the development. One of the public plazas. Here we can see the south elevation along North 3rd, and we can see the hotel that is currently under construction that would supersede in height the proposed 25 Kent development. It's 21 stories. So finally, the applicants are proposing 2 public plazas to the east and west of the site, which comply with the plaza requirements within the proposed text. The applicant would provide sort of triangular planted areas with a stationary movable seating. They would be flanked by active uses, and also they would sort of be accessible through the interior lobby space. To facilitate this development, the private applicant is proposing 2 CPC special permits pursuant to the proposed text amendment. First, the applicants are requesting to increase their maximum allowable floor area per zoning resolution 74-962. So the current allows for 2 FAR of commercial and industrial uses and up to 4.8 of community facility uses. The applicants are requesting an additional 1.96 FAR, or over 156,000 of incentive use floor area, subject to the use restrictions within 7496, and would provide 0.79 FAR, or over 63,000 square feet of required business enhancing uses, which are the required industrial component. Including the as-of-right uses, their new total program would increase to 4.75 FAR, or slightly over 380,000 of commercial and industrial uses. The proposed development would generate 516 jobs, 333 additional jobs in the as-of-right scenario. Per the loading requirements, the applicants are proposing to have a loading bay and freight elevator on the ground floor towards North 13th Street, that you can see here. And these would be connected to the business enhancing uses located on the 2nd and 3rd floor. These is 63,700 square feet would be permanently set aside for a specific set of industrial uses within parts of use groups 11, 16, 17, and 18. So as described earlier, the applicants are proposing to utilize the public plaza to increase their maximum building height from 110 to 135 feet. They meet all of the 7496 and 3770 requirements, except the public entrance proximity requirements. Here we can see that the zoning requires a maximum distance of 10 feet from a primary public entrance to the major portion of the public plaza. So the applicants are proposing a distance of 104 due to the location of the cores off the east and west streets. So finally, the applicants are proposing to reduce their accessory off-street parking and loading berth requirements. Current M12 parking regulations will require the production of 1,277 spaces depending on use, and their current proposed building program would require up to 10 loading berths. So the applicants are proposing to provide 275 parking, vehicle parking, and 3 loading berths. So it would be a reduction of 992 spaces and a reduction of 7 berths in total. Both the loading and the parking ramp would be located on the north wing of North 13th Street, which is a narrow two-way street. There is currently one other active curb cut out on North 13th on the side here. Here we can see the 275 below-grade parking spaces as well as the bicycle storage, and it would be accessed by stairs, elevators, and the freight elevator as well. In conclusion, the co-applicants are requesting a zoning text amendment to facilitate a new form of innovative development in the area. This single proposal alone would increase the amount of the district-built industrial space by 15%, would increase the IBZ total employment by almost 50%, and would increase the IBZ industrial employment by over 20%. The Community Board 1 held public hearings on February 2nd, 22, and March 2nd and the 8th, and submitted a recommendation on March 8th to approve both special permits and disapprove with conditions the text amendment. The modifications include to reduce the enhanced business area geography to only include the proposed development site, to require that the industrial space be leased at 20% below market rate, to require that the industrial space be contracted out to a local mission-driven nonprofit to monitor the uses, enforce affordability, and market the vacancies, and request that DCP develop an as-of-right tool to allow industrial businesses in the M11 to the north to increase bulk and height, to require the developer to provide good quality family-sustaining service jobs and prevailing wages, and to reduce the FAR to a more reasonable scale. The Brooklyn Borough President held a public hearing on March 21st and submitted a recommendation on April 8th to approve the special permits and approve with conditions the text amendment. The City Planning Department just received these recommendations, so we're reviewing them, but some of the conditions of the approval to the text amendment include to initially limit the applicability to zoning lots that are at least 80,000 square feet, which be the size of the blocks in this area. In addition to the recordation requirement as a means to provide regulatory oversight of the business enhancing uses, they suggest that you require that a regulatory agreement would be provided that would oblige the administrating agent of this industrial space to provide yearly reporting, and anytime that there would be a different tenant to also provide updates, as well as sort of provide that it is in compliance and is in the intent of the text. This agent would also play a role in the selection of the business enhancing use. Also, they suggest that require plaques depicting the floor plan representation in the second and third floors where these uses would be located. And also that the city awards 41 million to, that the city awards from the 41 million nonprofit industrial allocation to such nonprofits that would want to sort of purchase this area, this space in the building. And there's some others, but we can sort of go with questions first. Thank you.
Thank you, Vanessa. Questions? Let's start with Ms. Delos.
How are you? Thank you for that.
Thanks.
It's a lot to cover in a short period of time. Just looking at, just kind of revisiting community board's recommendations, I'm still kind of digesting the borough president, so I'll come back to that probably on Wednesday. Was there some research or information about how they got to the recommendation that 20% below market is that what is currently affordable to light industrial in the area? I'm asking if they're here on Monday, on Wednesday, it would be helpful to kind of know how that was arrived at. And then, actually, I'll stop there. Thanks.
Okay, we'll look into it. Thanks.
Ms. Efron?
I hope the applicant or its team can explain how they, or actually, let me step back. Is it the planning staff's determination of the number of loading docks, or was this determined by the applicant? Because it seems as if the amount of square feet attached to one particular loading dock is less relevant than the number of tenants using a particular loading dock. So for 60,000 square feet, if you have 10 tenants, that could be a really significant mismatch with loading docks. So that's one question. And then sort of part and parcel of that, the traffic study referred to 8 trucks at maximum, at peak. And for 60,000 square feet of manufacturing space, that seems extremely low, particularly since with a large amount of office space, there will be some regular truck traffic anyway. So I just hope those will be answered. And then finally, my third question is just around the plazas. It seems a little bit redundant to have the plazas if, in fact, the interior glassed-in atrium or lobby space is already committed to and has retail off of it. So it seems as if it just brings the project up considerably higher without really adding any additional amenities, since if it is retail down the center, there would be a great incentive for the building owner to have as many people coming through that as possible. So given that there's a park planned right across the street, are the outside plazas redundant? And just because I keep asking this about plazas, since we're in a plaza mode these days, will there be any public restrooms? With that sort of traffic, it seems like a really important amenity.
Okay, so I'll answer the plaza question, and I'll let Winston answer. So the applicant is, the interior atrium that you're referring to is private space that the applicant is lining with commercial. However, that wouldn't be considered a public amenity as much as the plaza. So the plazas would be provided for the community for use at any time, and it would sort of create an amenity for the community and sort of a relief from the development, from the addition, from the density of the building. But I don't see how this is particular to this proposal, so it wouldn't necessarily apply to other projects that would be provided within this enhanced business area. So another person might not provide this atrium. So I would say that.
Yep.
And then,
So it's all or nothing. Either you have the plazas in the extra height or you don't, just because this one, got it. Okay.
and because this is an industrial area, sort of plazas are lacking in the area. Even if there's a future park across the street, there's not a lot of public places to sit and have lunch and so, and the restrooms are going to be provided in the future park across the street.
And have the funds for that been allocated?
There is the Bushwick Inlet Park, the park that is already city-owned, has a facility there that is operational, has restrooms.
Mr. Cantor?
Question, did I understand you to say that the public will be allowed into the area between the buildings?
Yes, that's the intention.
Is this for passive or active activities?
Passive, it's retail uses and,
Okay.
yeah, sure.
So the applicant is in the audience
Okay.
and is listening to all questions in case we are
I think-
unable to answer them
I'm
at the
just trying to
moment.
understand, aside from people wanting to walk in here to go shopping, what is,
So this is sort of a lobby space lined with commercial in terms of the activity that you would.
It's an interior enclosed space
Right.
with benches and other seating and retail that opens up into
Right.
it.
And
And
what-
it's an amenity that the applicant is providing. It's publicly accessible. They intend it to be publicly accessible. but it is interior to the building.
Well, okay. I don't know where the public
It's
is
private
coming-
space.
Correct.
It's private space. I don't know where the public is coming from to use that space. That's somebody else's issue for marketing.
So we have, these are the entrances here, but also you can have access from here and here.
Right. So in short, there are entrances on all 4 sides of the building into this interior space.
By adding the, quote, public availability, is that part of the request for an increase in the FAR?
No,
It's unrelated.
unrelated.
Correct.
There's no benefit other than it's being a nice addition.
Yes.
That's correct.
Okay.
Well, it's, the benefit is presumably it's retail space, so it
Yeah.
will generate revenue, but
It is similar in design to other buildings that we've seen in other cities that have a sort of a mixed-use character.
Is there a public that's expected to visit that site? I know the people in the building certainly would.
I believe that is the intention of the applicants, to provide a space both for tenants as well as other visitors from around the area.
And this
Different
is,
question.
sorry.
Different question. When you refer to the height going up to 135 feet, I believe, on this building, is that to the roof
Yes,
or to the roof parapet?
Yes.
yes.
Could you pull up the slide showing with the rendering?
Cross section.
Yep. What is all that rooftop activity in the buildings?
That would be
Those-
mechanical
Mechanical
equipment, bulkheads.
But, okay, I would assume that, but it looks like it's like 20, 25 feet high, and it covers a lot more of the roof than I believe the code allows, and I'm curious as to what they have in mind with respect to that.
I
We
think
could-
the applicant can sort of talk more about that on Wednesday, but we can also
Okay.
specify further.
We fully expect that it's code compliant.
Okay.
It's just the render.
I remembered.
Ms. Ellis and Ms. Levin?
Sorry, I needed another sip of my coffee, I guess, to remember my question. So, two-part question. So the ratio of, 1 square foot of industrial to the 2.5 square feet of bonus area, how is that ratio determined? And then I know the community board mentioned that they believe that that ratio should be tweaked. Did they actually go further and make a recommendation as to what it should be?
So, I mean, part of the reason that the applicants and we decided on that ratio is because it is typically in buildings that we have seen with ground floor light industrial use, where oftentimes light industrial use wants to be located, is about at a 0.8 FAR. Right? And in fact, throughout, as Vanessa pointed out, throughout this small IBZ, many of the light industrial uses are in fact in approximately that FAR range. And the community board was, I think, informed by public testimony from both the applicants as well as others who had suggestions, made recommendations that they then incorporated into their recommendation.
Okay, so I think that helps cover it doesn't necessarily cover the bonusable portion, though, like how that piece came about.
It was deemed by the developers, the development team, as being the appropriate ratio. It also matches the maximum FAR that is allowed here as of right for community facility uses. So it's keeping within that range of FARs and density existing.
Gotcha, okay.
Ms. Levin?
Maybe this is more of a comment than a question, but that's exactly the issue that I'm having great difficulty with on this application, and I look forward to understanding more about as a result of the public hearing, because I'm having a hard time seeing what the enhancement is if we simply require what the common base of industrial use in the area is, and then reward that with another 2 FAR of, let's face it, it's going to be office building. Now, I understand we get the advantage of no hotels and some other uses that we want to exclude, but it strikes me as, the enhancement here strikes me as really kind of a race to the bottom. The minimum required industrial, I realize it's a business sector in this area that's facing some challenges, but I'm having a hard time understanding why it should be rewarded with another 2 FAR essentially of commercial. So you don't have to respond, I'll figure it all out. I'm hoping I'll get some illumination on that issue. I understand from the EAS that there are really only 2 other sites that it's anticipated this might be used for, and then the EAS sort of identifies 2 and then pulls 1 back. So is there essentially really only, what are the others, what's the additional potential in this area for using this process, and do we have any knowledge that development plans are underway?
By the way, I would just point out in terms of the light industrial, as Vanessa pointed out, the manufacturing portion of the light industrial has been decreasing significantly, but dramatically actually in the last 5 years. And that this is actually a way that to stop that.
So it's holding the line rather than...
It is holding a line, right? It is definitely what I think the image that we've portrayed here, what we found, the analysis is that this is a changing light industrial area. It's changing rapidly over to commercial entertainment and hotel uses, and this is a great way of capturing a minimum of light industrial space, as well as allowing for a lot of jobs.
So as part of the larger EAS, this block south of the development site was identified as one of the subset. Oops. Sorry. And also here. So this area here was also identified as the second area. However, these were more conceptual analyses, and as these proposals would come, if the proposals would come forward to apply for special permits, that a more specific environmental review would be performed on these sites, and identifying the sort of the problematic areas that would be triggered after the 25 Kendo proposal would be built.
Do you know what the size, Vanessa, is of those lots? Footprints?
So the one to the south is around 80,000 square feet, similar to 25 Ken. The other one's about 40, so half.
Other questions about this? Ms. Efron?
How will it work with the special enhancement district if the project is scaled down? Will the industrial space be scaled down proportionately, or will the industrial space stay the same amount? In other words, once we approve it, let's assume financing world changes and the applicant reduces its plans, it would be still proportionate, right? There isn't a baseline of manufacturing space.
Correct. It is proportionate. So it's 1 square foot of enhancement use or business enhancement, required business enhancement use, to 2.5 square feet of incentive uses. So if that's scaled back, then that is reduced. All of those are reduced. The base is not. The base remains at 2 FAR.
You know, I point out that this is a vacant lot right now. We've never seen, I don't recall, you might recall, when we've last seen industrial space created.
I'd
as
say there's
opposed to
user
preserved.
occupied, not.
And frankly, not even office space really created in a new office space in a manufacturing area. So I think the challenge is, do we have the incentive ratio reasonably right, or are we? Commissioner Levin described it as a race to the bottom. I would sort of say it's how do we create new space? It's not so much a race to the bottom. It's a how do we use the mechanisms we have available to create new space that hopefully modern space that is usable by manufacturers and industrial users in a world where we, at least in New York City, where we really haven't seen the space created.
I hope to hear from the applicant how they plan to make this successful manufacturing space. And I think that's sort of what we've been missing a little bit.
Okay. They're here in the audience and they hear you loud and clear and have a story to tell.
Is there a tenant?
Well, and I, to your question, I mean, financing is a real issue, and the question is whether the specific can be, expanded to the general, and that's a more broader question. Any other questions for Vanessa on 25 Kent? We'll have an interesting hearing on Wednesday, I think. See you on Wednesday. Thanks.
Thank you.
So, speaking of Wednesday, staff have prepared the following favorable resolutions, which include Socrates Sculpture Park, which is proposed city map amendment. We have 375 Pearl Street, which is an office space application for HRA. 6 Roma Road, which is a special natural area district restoration of trees concerning a single-family home. And 368 Westervelt Avenue, which is a special hillsides preservation district to subdivide an existing lot to facilitate future residential development. Commissioners, also, I should just note that you won't have any hearings scheduled for Wednesday, April the 27th. So as a result, that meeting will be canceled. On April 20th.
It's exciting. We got a day back.
Don't worry. We wouldn't want to take a date away from you.
So on Monday, April the 25th, which is a review session day, we have 3276 Jerome Avenue. We've talked about this proposal a couple of times. It's a proposed zoning map amendment from R8 to C82 to bring existing uses into conformance. And we have the proposed Water Street Upgrades Text Amendment affiliated with POPs and infilling of arcades. I'm going to ask Richard to come up for our post-hearing follow-up discussion. And before he starts, I just wanted to note that 170 Buffalo Avenue, which you've seen, it has been withdrawn.
Okay.
No longer necessary.
Yeah, I think you.
No longer needed.
We allowed it in.
There you go.
I hope their water issues get resolved.
Richard.
Sure. We had a very productive public hearing last Wednesday. We heard a number of testimonies, mostly in favor, a couple opposed. We also received some written testimony. There was a property owner that submitted written testimony, 75 Wall Street. That was positive. I think you had that in your hands in time for the public hearing. We also received written testimony from Design Trust for Public Space, which I thought was a very positive recommendation. I will note that we expect to receive positive written testimony from the AIA soon, hopefully in time to reflect as part of the record. There are a number of recommendations, both written and were provided on Wednesday that we, the applicant team, so I'll be speaking both for the department but also for Downtown Alliance and for EDC, that we should recommend. I think some modifications that we would like to propose that the commission make in its final vote, hopefully on the 25th. So I'll go through some of the recommendations, but first just want to note that we will recommend for the commission to make a number of clarifying edits to the proposed zoning text, just throughout, clarifying some titles and just adding some comments here and there and moving some words around. We also want to clarify the compliance reporting requirement for plazas. We want to clarify that residential uses that are permitted on the ground floor will be limited to lobbies. We want to clarify the legal requirements for compensating amenities that are provided within the public right-of-way. This is particular to 100 and 110 Wall Street. Basically, we just write in a requirement for a restricted declaration as that, I believe that it was written as an agreement between the city and the applicant or the owner. We would just be very explicit and say a restricted declaration. So moving on to the recommendations. So the first recommendation was that there is, from the community board, that there is a 60-day referral for certifications for the infill and the plaza upgrades. We are recommending that the commission modify the zoning text to include a community board referral, but for 45 days. We think 45 days is consistent with our referral procedures and would give the community board enough time to appropriately consider these applications for infill. We are also committing to returning back to the community board a year after the adoption of the zoning text amendment to report back on the status and hopefully success of the proposal, provided that someone does take advantage of this within a year. So we, the three partners, will go back to them. There was a recommendation regarding plaza amenities and resilience. We don't think that the zoning could explicitly require that these amenities be resilient, but that is a stated preference. We agree that they should be resilient and they should withstand the force of a storm. We do note there is a maintenance requirement that now is being required as part of the upgrades, and it is the owner's interest to make sure that these amenities don't get knocked around during a storm. So we believe that the text as written does appropriately make sure that these amenities will withstand the force of a storm and will be hopefully replaced very soon thereafter. There were a number of comments regarding compensating amenities, and this is speaking to both the community board's recommendation and some written testimony. At the review session for this project, at the pre-hearing review session, I made a number of comments that I think we want to stand by. Basically, it's the question of whether or not the plaza upgrades is a sufficient compensating amenity. Again, as I noted at that pre-hearing review session, while the text explicitly refers to plaza upgrades as that compensating amenity, we also believe that retail infill and what is provided is also a valuable public benefit. And we believe the appropriate way, again, to evaluate this proposal and the benefit of these plaza upgrades and new retail spaces is to compare it to what we're losing. So again, as I think many of the presentation materials and hopefully this proposal has made clear, is that the benefits that we're getting again are these redesigned greener public spaces, these safer, brighter public spaces and streets, more restaurants and shops and local amenities, a more human scale street, and clear requirements for the design of these the spaces and the improvement and maintenance of those spaces. And in terms of loss, these are spaces that are elevated and they're set back. So these arcades, these dark, arcades that are elevated, they're set back, they dead end, they're too narrow, the columns are too close to or too thick or too close together, or there are already sufficient open areas that provide this pedestrian circulation. We feel that when comparing what we're gaining to what we're losing, we believe the public benefit of these plaza upgrades and the retail infill, along with the clear standards that are being set forth in this proposed text amendment, greatly exceed the public benefit of the arcades as they exist in their current configuration. But we can continue to have a discussion about this. Moving on, the Alliance will continue its discussions with the School Construction Authority and the Department of Education regarding the possibility of schools and pre-K centers within these spaces. They have reached out, and there is an ongoing discussion, and we think that will continue well beyond, hopefully, the adoption of this text amendment. There was a comment about lighting requirements. We believe that the lighting requirements for the plazas, along with the new building walls that are closer to the sidewalk, will help brighten up these spaces and the sidewalks to help provide these safer and lighter streets. There was a comment about construction infill being performed in construction taking place in an environmentally friendly manner. We think that the provisions of this text amendment, along with the already adopted provisions of Zone Green, provide enough flexibility and to encourage that these high standards of construction do take place. Moving on to the Municipal Art Society requested that in their testimony, and then they submitted a copy of their testimony. They requested that we perform an economic analysis to ensure that plaza improvements are an appropriate compensating amenity. I'm going to go back to my comment before about, again, evaluating the kind of improved design of these public spaces and this provision of these retail spaces, and evaluating and comparing that to the loss of these, what we believe are underutilized and poorly functioning spaces. We do not think that an economic analysis is not only necessary, but it's rather, and as you saw from testimony on Wednesday, it's hard to quantify the value of public benefit, the benefit to the public. So we think that the text and what is being proposed sufficiently or does not require an economic analysis. The MAS also believes we should use this text amendment as a model and a precedent in looking at how other public spaces could be redesigned in Manhattan. I'd like to reiterate that this is very specific to Water Street. We're very focused on helping Water Street become a vibrant and very improved pedestrian experience. Maybe we may learn something, maybe we won't. I hope we do learn a lot about how public spaces can be improved and how we can really transform an underperforming commercial corridor to an attractive district that people want to stay in. But these regulations that are being proposed are based specifically on careful study of these plazas, arcades on Water Street. Again, the Design Trust sent a very positive recommendation. The recommendation that they outlined in their letter, we believe, are already addressed in the proposed zoning text, so we do not think that the text needs to be modified. And then coming back to the Borough President's recommendation, so the core of her recommendation was that the uses permitted by the zoning text are a little too broad. These are uses that are permitted on retail streets within Lower Manhattan, with some restrictions, basically not allowing offices on the ground floor, auto showrooms. But she recommended that we modify the zoning text to exclude use group 5, which is hotels, use group 7, so home maintenance repair, use group 9, so larger or business services serving larger areas, 10, which is large-scale retail, which I believe is probably the main focus of her recommendation. These are spaces that are larger than 10,000 square feet. While staff does not believe that these uses are incompatible with the area and the street, I believe we wanted to kind of open it up to the commission to discuss and to think about and hear your thoughts moving forward and how we should potentially incorporate or not incorporate her recommendation. This can be incorporated in many different ways, and I think we'd like to hear your thoughts.
Thank you, Richard. It's always dangerous to say.
I
Want to hear
from
the
us.
commission's thoughts. But Richard, having opened the door to commissioners' thoughts, we welcome your thoughts. Ms. Delos.
So, Richard, I appreciate the summary of the hearing. I guess partly what I heard from those that had criticism about the proposal was the definition of retail as an amenity. Maybe that was just too generous, I guess, and that really the issue was more about activating a space and to be kind of more agnostic about the use. I kind of walked away hearing that. And, I think that to me speaks to having use groups that don't drive us in one direction over another, or point us in one direction over another. I mean, I don't know if that's...
Well, if I understand what you're saying, you would, and I do think the goal is to activate the street. That's the ultimate objective here. But if I understand what you're saying, that we should be basically open to uses and not try to drive it in one direction or another.
Except for the fact that there's definitely a need for community facility space as well, I think. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that there's a need for lots of different kinds of uses, and presumably the more varied, the better. I don't want to put words in your mouth. But Ms. Levin.
Well, I think we do agree that it's activating the streets that's the important thing. And we also heard a lot of testimony about the need for local services for the folks who are living and working in that neighborhood. And I think that the uses that the Borough President has requested we eliminate, hotel lobbies and large-scale retail, don't accomplish those purposes at all. And there was also a recommendation in there that we add some restrictions on frontage so that we were sure we got more smaller uses rather than a whole long, less active. I think building into these spaces is going to be a challenge anyway. They're less likely to be large spaces, but there is the potential for some of those lobbies to get converted and combined with the infill into something larger than we may intend. Personally, I'd be in favor of eliminating those use groups that lend themselves to larger uses, because I think we heard pretty strongly from the community board and some of the other speakers about the sort of the neighborhood vitality that is sought here. And I think that that restriction would encourage that vitality.
Ms. Efron?
I agree with the exception of the hotel use, which I never thought I'd come out and say, but there is a chance that that would increase the vitality later into the night, where that.
The hotel use?
The
or-
hotel use, that, I mean, given the type of neighborhood that's emerging there, it feels as if hotel use could actually be a positive in terms of street vitality.
Well, there is an existing hotel
The
on.
Andaz, right?
The Andaz on Water Street, and it is pretty active. I mean, and actually, it's to your point, and it is a hotel that really, for the most part, is on the second floor and above, and really does benefit, or would benefit, if it could, entrance at least could be pushed further out. So it's,
The other thing I've been thinking is, on this compensatory question and what really counts, having in the last 4 days really immersed myself in that neighborhood as best I can, it was very interesting to see how little life really was within the arcades. But the plazas have a heartbeat, and it seems to me that the buildings that are specifically those that have both arcades and access to a plaza may be special in a different way, and that there should be some thought about whether they have a different responsibility to really, if they're getting infill arcade space, compensate with more of an improvement or more activity in a public plaza.
I should note that when you do have infill on a plaza, there's a further requirement that, there are the permitted uses in this district, but then on top of that, a minimum of 50% of the frontage must be service or retail. And then there are additional regulations for if you have blank walls for whatever reason, you must cover them with screening.
Something, I didn't hear what it was.
Siri.
it's one of those days.
There are additional requirements for screening any blank walls that may exist. And there are also the requirement that there be no banks permitted.
I meant more specifically dollar improvements.
I see. I see.
Really compensatory, but that may be going too far, and maybe by the very things you're mentioning, that in fact is that. Responding more towards the community board's discussion about whether or not the money should go back into the city coffers, I was thinking, is there some way in which, just on a very local scale, there could be some participation in the plazas for those who are getting infill? But you asked for our thoughts, I'm sorry, it's broader than you wanted.
Any other thoughts on this? We'll take this all under advisement and come back with a very specific recommendation. I think Richard opened it up much too much.
Yeah, well, I would point out, has anyone noticed the infill that the Hilton Hotel has done on 6th Avenue?
Yes.
Which is just dreadful.
Yes, it is.
Horribly dead infill. Doesn't
Well,
apply-
I think
doesn't
six-
apply here, but it's a cautionary tale.
No, and I think,
Yeah.
I think we all recognize that 6th Avenue generally is the
Yeah.
problem, so.
So the hotel use is where you're going, that was the segue.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Thank you.
Okay, so, and on May 9th, we have the proposed zoning map and text amendment concerning rezoning from an existing M21 district to an M14/R6 mixed-use district, and to establish a mandatory a mandatory inclusionary housing area coterminous with rezoning area. This project, hey Connie, also known as Oxford Nursing Home, I just want to note that the certification and the special use permit have been withdrawn as well for this application, because they're no longer needed. But Connie's going to walk us through the applicant's response and to questions that were raised at the commission, at least initially, and then we expect additional information and conversation on this.
Good afternoon. So as Jackie just mentioned, the applications for the special permit and the certification have been officially withdrawn as they no longer apply to the proposed development pursuant to the adoption of the Zoning for Quality and Affordability text amendment. So the remaining actions are just the zoning map change and the zoning text amendment to map a mandatory inclusionary housing area on the rezoning area, coterminous with the rezoning area, excuse me. So a number of comments and requests were made at the public hearing, and as Jackie mentioned, that information, some of which has been provided in advance of today's review session. So specifically, those were the evacuation plan for the existing facility that's located in Fort Greene, Brooklyn, as well as a summary of the revisions that would have to be made to tailor that kind of evacuation plan to the proposed facility, reflecting the new building that would be built, as well as the site-specific conditions, obviously its location in the flood zone being one of the most critical. As also detailed in the letter, there are additional information is forthcoming, and you have a bullet-pointed list of what you can expect in advance of the April 25th review session.
So I guess the question today, because obviously the information is still, significant information is still forthcoming, is, and I don't know if you've had a chance to really review the material that was submitted by Oxford, but are there questions that, and issues that triggered that we should try to refine what additional material we should be getting? So with that, Ms. Delos.
So one question I had from what they submitted, and I don't have it in front of me unfortunately, but if I recall correctly, one of the accepting facilities is also located in a flood zone for 25 beds?
It might be one that's in Coney Island.
Yeah. That seems like it's inappropriate, considering the circumstances or what likely may happen, or may happen in the future.
Remember, this is for the current facility as opposed to the proposed facility.
I understand. I mean, I understand that they looked through their current evacuation plan and they looked at the things that would have to be updated, generally speaking, if it were to be approved. I guess.
Well, I think they submitted two things. I think what they submitted was the things that they have to do and their current evacuation plan, which the current evacuation plan lists all the facilities. Presumably if the current, I'm just speculating, but I assume if the current facility had to be evacuated, it would probably not be for flooding reasons since it's not in a flood zone.
Right,
So,
right,
you know, for them, Coney Island might be inappropriate.
right. I guess, I mean, the two main questions that I had walking away from the hearing, and I definitely think it was a fascinating hearing, and it's a very, very tough call, honestly. I'm forgetting the person who testified that 9% of current nursing home beds are within flood zones, and if this were to be approved, then it would go to 11%. I guess the question I have is, do we have an opinion, or does some appropriate public entity have an opinion about what is the appropriate threshold of vulnerable populations that should be placed in a flood zone, and what is reasonable for the other facilities to absorb or accommodate in the case of emergency? I don't know the answer to that, but it seems like that would be kind of a threshold question as part of this process. And then the other one, you know, and I know Red Hook really well, and I know I was very involved in post-Sandy work in Red Hook, including managing affordable mixed income co-op after the superstorm, and know how hard it was to get in and out of there. So I guess the other question I have is related to the traffic analysis and like assuming a worst case traffic scenario, given how limited access is, and what would that mean in terms of pre-planning for potential evacuation. And, you know, I think they said that the generator, I wanted to say 72 hours? 72 hours. So, I mean, Red Hook was out without electricity for weeks. So the other question is, in the case of a worst case scenario, would those accepting facilities truly be able to absorb that level of population, not just for a few days, right, but potentially for weeks? And so that's, those are the questions I have. And, granted, I know there's tremendous need for access, for nursing home beds. And, I think we heard a lot of compelling testimony about local access. But the location of such a vulnerable population in this area definitely raises a lot of concerns for me.
Actually, Connie, with respect to that, I thought that one of the pieces of material we asked for, and I don't recall seeing it, was the experience of Oxford as a receiving site
yes.
during Sandy, and how long were those
So we've-
residents there at Oxford? How long did they have to accommodate?
So that is
people?
one of the pieces of information that will be provided. So we've asked
Okay.
for some context around that, the number of people that they received from other facilities, what facilities those people came from, how long they stayed with Oxford, and did they go back to those facilities, et cetera.
Ms. Marin?
I would like to know how many, because it seems like, it's the devil we know and the devil we don't know. We know from our experience from Sandy that this was a very horrible storm. I too am doing work with Sandy victims. It's devastating. But I guess what I'm trying to get at is that these are buildings that were designed pre-storm.
Yeah.
So these buildings are being designed post-storm. And having been recently admitted to the hospital, I would rather be in my room 3 days in a row, 7 days in a row, whatever that amount of time was, knowing that I was safe and comfortable, knowing that this building has been designed to accept the flood level. My question is, I understand the generator runs for 72 hours, but that 72 hours is predicated on the number of, on the amount of gas that you have to run that generator. So this facility could, in essence, run for 3 or 4 weeks. And I'm just going to assume that the generator is enough. So the question would be is the facility then equipped with the right amount of, I would say, a gas holding tank, for lack of a better terminology, that would allow them to safely keep their residents at the facility safely? Because the other thing we heard was that the workers are prepared to stay for whatever length of time they need to stay. And unless there's somebody who's gravely ill that needs to get out, you really don't need to get people in and out until that water subsides or whatever that.
But I don't know that they have the choice. If the state, if it's a declaration of emergency is made and government says you must evacuate, I think as a licensed facility, I think they're required to. I think
Right,
that's the
but are
difference.
those, what predicates the evacuation? I guess we would need to know as well what predicates the evacuation, because that evacuation may have been promulgated as a result of not having these Sandy measures in place and assuming that the building wasn't retrofitted.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very hard to speak to that because we're talking about, we can refer to Sandy and what happened there, but any future disaster could look like Sandy, may not look like Sandy, so it's hard to say exactly what would trigger
I
that.
know, but just like the audience commented, I mean, any future storm, we may not know where it's gonna hit. It may hit in the central of Manhattan or the central of the Bronx. We don't know what's gonna happen.
This is
So
a flood
you're
zone.
absolutely right, to try and preclude a development from going forward when we have all these measures in place and that the buildings department's gone through, FEMA has gone through, the measures that we know
I don't have concern about the building.
were a result of Sandy. I mean, all we can do is wait for the next major catastrophe and then prepare for that. I mean, we can't really predict what's gonna happen. And that's the one thing that I think was a good takeaway.
Right, I guess, and this is one of the things that makes this complicated, is that we're really
Not about the
not
building.
suited to really assess emergency responses. We're really making a land use decision. And so, and admittedly, I think we all recognize that land use decision here is made more complicated by the population that we're dealing with and making certain assumptions about how that population would be dealt with. But to the extent we can, we should try to separate the land use decision from the more technical emergency responses that, whether it's health or other agencies and experts are responsible for. And it's difficult to do, for sure. Mr. Cantor.
You know, we're talking about risk analysis with somebody else's parents. The issue is, in my view, there's a risk analysis that hasn't been performed, whether it was 7, 9% to 11% or whatever, hasn't been done. Methods of getting in and out of the community in the event of an event haven't been done. The traffic consultant, who is probably the best one to answer that question, wasn't available. The structural engineer wasn't available. Why would one build over a fault? Okay, I can recall vividly some years back in California, the school was demolished because after many years of arguing, they finally gave up the ghost because the school was over an active fault. Now, we know that an active seismic fault and a flood are different things, but each of them carry risk. Each of them are dealing with people. We have a situation here where there's another place, someplace that can satisfy the needs. We know Oxford's a good vendor, okay? And I commented after the hearing, I don't ever recall a hearing where absolutely nobody said anything negative against the applicant. So the issue isn't the applicant itself, but the issue is, are they stretching at other people, are they stretching the rope beyond where it should be stretched when there are alternatives, more expensive perhaps, but alternatives without dealing with elderly people's lives?
Well, it's certainly an issue, and we'll get some additional information, but that addresses some of those, hopefully, some of those points you raise, Mr. Cantor. But again, to Mr. Marin's point, there's one of the countervailing considerations is this a facility that can withstand a flood, even a flood of Sandy-like levels? And is that, I hear what you're saying, we don't know yet, or maybe we'll never know.
Been given in a reasonable scenario.
But that, I think that's just, I understand the proof question, I'm just saying as a matter of fact, if it is can withstand a storm or a flood like Sandy, whether it's a countervailing consideration. But anyway, Ms. Levin and Ms. Efron.
Yeah, following up on that, it struck me that the Vidaris report that we're given really isn't a recommendation about how to site a nursing home at this location. It's what you have to do to comply with the building code.
Correct.
With no indication, let's assume that the applicant is going to take that advice, but the building hasn't been designed yet. So that's really just the recipe of what it takes to do what the law is going to require. So the Vidaris report really doesn't add anything to our analysis at all. I thought the Red Hook houses and other residents' testimony about the need for a nursing home in this location is truly compelling. And in my view, that's the only reason to allow, to take this risk is if you are fulfilling a local need. But then I realized, wait a minute, this facility, while located in Red Hook, is going to draw its, as the current facility does, is going to draw its clientele from all across Brooklyn. And so how it really isn't, and beyond, really isn't so much a local facility. And for those residents in the nursing home who aren't local, they're going to be even more isolated. We heard some pretty painful testimony about Red Hook houses folks whose family members are in nursing homes that they can't get to. Well, other people in the city can't get to Red Hook either. So, this is a very complicated one. When we get the information about the certificate of need, it struck me that the certificate of need was issued in 2009, which was before Sandy. So I hope we can get confirmation that, I think the applicant did testify it was still in place, but I would like to know specifically from the Department of State, whether the Department of Health, what reconsideration they have given, if any, or will there be a reconsideration process? Because it's obviously a different situation than in 2009 when certificate of need was issued. And we also heard testimony that implied that the federal government wouldn't fund a nursing home in a floodplain. Well, maybe that's not binding on us, but I think it's a relevant piece of information if we learn that other regulatory agencies have looked at this situation and just said, no, we won't do it, or yes, it's okay if you do these other things. So that extra context would be helpful for me.
So the applicant's representative is here and can provide that clarity, and I'll just make a few comments about some of the points that have been made. And so one is around kind of, you spoke to the compelling nature of the Red Hook, the NYCHA residents' kind of need for a nursing home specifically. And so I think some additional information is forthcoming around, they stated specifically that it would be discriminatory to have, geographic location of someone be a priority for admissions, but that, we'll get more information about how admissions occur and what, if any, priority factors there may be. Another thing I would point out is that the medical facility, which is part of this proposal, specifically the call for resilient medical facilities has been articulated over time in various different ways. So the Red Hook 197A is one of them, and more recently with New York Rising, the reconstruction program has also highlighted that as a specific need, so I put that out there as well. In terms of, we have reached out to some of the different regulatory bodies, and it's our understanding that there's no federal agency that has any kind of, that precludes the siting of a nursing home, whether or not they're getting, Medicare and Medicaid, just because of a location in a flood zone. They would just have to build to the applicable standards. That also goes, for our understanding, from the Department of Health at this time as well. So we don't have any information that would lend us to believe that there would be a reconsideration post-Sandy, but obviously we can follow up and double
Okay,
check
but
on
there
that.
was testimony about how if this were a federally funded facility, it wouldn't get the federal funding.
So
Do you
this-
understand what that's about, and is there?
It may be, so the
truth there?
existing nursing home does participate in Medicare and Medicaid. So they're getting federal monies
Yeah.
for certain patients that are located at their site. And so there isn't anything, if the existing facility was located in a flood zone, it wouldn't preclude them from getting that federal funding for their patients. That's my
Right,
understanding.
but the materials alluded to an executive order that prohibited some kind of facilities not here. I think it was a post-Katrina thing.
I think the borough president's recommendation made reference to it.
Yeah, and
Remember
the conclusion is technically it doesn't apply, but I'd like to know more about what is it that's prohibited under what circumstances.
I think the question, Connie, is really if federal funds were being used for construction or for capital for a certain kind of facility that served a vulnerable population, would federal funds be precluded if the facility that was being built was in a flood zone?
Okay.
And I don't know the answer to that, but that, I think, is the narrow question.
Yes, correct. Even knowing that that's hypothetical because we're being told it wouldn't apply here, I'd still like to understand what that regulation is.
Ms. Efron.
I agree with Commissioner Levin that the most compelling testimony from the residents was their desire to have their elderly loved ones nearby, and whether or not that happens because of this is questionable. But the other compelling argument was to have 24-hour, 7-day-a-week emergency care, which was different than what they described as a good number of clinics that weren't open other than pretty limited hours. So I think there was testimony saying it would be 24/7, but that seems to me to be a pretty critical part of this plan. And then just all this question about the federal regulations around building in a flood zone. Is it even conceivable that they could be properly insured for such a vulnerable population in a flood zone? I know that's their business question, but it just leads me to wonder, again, if this was all done, if the business plan was set up prior to Sandy, is there reason to be concerned about it post?
I just want to, actually it just occurred to me that again, a compelling reason to support this would be if this was an emergency health resource during a flood, to not just the residents of the facility, but to the surrounding Red Hook community. That might not be, have a preference in terms of being residents in nursing home, but presumably would benefit by having a health facility right there in an emergency. So it's a very complicated issue, and we still have some work to do in a very short period of time. Any other questions for Connie, who's got her work cut out for her in the next couple of weeks?
That's a tough one.
I haven't talked about MIH.
Okay. Thank you, Connie. I think
Thank you.
that's it.
Mr. Chairman, I think that's everything that's on the agenda for today.
A broad range of issues today. And with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
See you on Wednesday.